Hi guys. Tonight we drift together into a frost-blue dawn, where the world feels both impossibly wide and strangely close, as if snow has tucked everything under a single pale blanket. You stand there in second-person stillness, your breath rising in soft grey wisps that curl and vanish before your eyes, leaving you wondering just for a second how American Indian families once survived mornings exactly like this. With temperatures so low, you probably won't survive this without a good sense of humor, and at least 3 layers of fur. The sky stretches overhead in icy silence, but the land hums with old footsteps, old choices, and old endurance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. You take your first step across ancient snowfields, and the cold grates against your lungs in a way that feels almost personal. It's the kind of chill that bites rather than whispers. But that's how winter opens in these northern homelands. With a test. Not a cruel one, just firm. Like nature raising an eyebrow to see what you're made of. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly into your awareness here. Many indigenous nations across North America developed winter migration patterns long before European arrival, shifting camps to safer ground or richer hunting zones as temperatures dropped. But out here, walking through this softly glowing dawn, it doesn't feel like a textbook note. It feels like instinct, your instinct telling you to move toward shelter before your eyelashes freeze together. Snow creaks under your feet in that oddly satisfying way, a sound that is half crunch, half sigh. Even though your fingers tingle with cold, there's a strange peace in the way the land refuses to hurry. Every drift and shadow looks carefully placed, as if winter is the world's slowest and most dramatic interior designer. Somewhere to your left, a crow complains with a hoarse call, reminding you that even in the deep freeze, someone always has commentary. You pull your cloak tighter, fur brushing your jaw, and you feel the first real thread of connection to the people who once walked here, dressed in clothing stitched by hands that had learned long ago how to outwit the cold. You push ahead, wind teasing at your cheeks, and notice something curious. A small rise of snow that looks just a bit too smooth, too rounded. You crouch, brushing the powder aside, and uncover a patch of frozen lichen clinging to exposed rock. It looks like nature's accidental graffiti, green-grey curls frozen mid-wiggle. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. Some northern nations once used crushed lichen not just for food in emergencies but also as insulation in winter boots, a sort of prehistoric sock liner that worked shockingly well. You wiggle your toes at the idea, wondering why modern stores didn't jump on the concept. Now, with all natural lichen comfort, might not be a bestseller, sure, but you never know. Your breath settles into a rhythm with your steps as you crest a small ridge. Beyond it, a valley unfurls a white mirror of rolling hills, flecked with the darker silhouettes of spruce. Their branches sag under the weight of last night's snowfall, like elders sitting in quiet meditation. You pause, letting the sight fill you, because in this second-person story, you don't rush. Out here, rushing is how you end up stepping onto a snow crust that collapses right through to your knees. And honestly, you've already had enough cardio for one morning. As you descend into the valley, you try to imagine what life would feel like if this frozen world wasn't just a scenic adventure, but your yearly reality. You picture families moving in quiet lines, sleds creaking softly, children bundled so completely that their only visible features were playful eyes and the occasional runaway mitten. Snow would be both ally and adversary. It muffles sound, making travel stealthy. It also hides hazards, making travel unpredictable. You wonder, would you sense danger before seeing it? Would you trust the firmness of a shadowed drift? Would your ears pick up the subtle tonal differences between safe snow and you've made a terrible mistake snow? The cold sharpens your senses until every sound feels amplified. The brush of wind against your hood, the distant crackle of a frozen tree splitting under its own weight, Even your heartbeat feels louder in your ears. You're not alone, though, and you wouldn't have been alone historically either. Families move together, supporting one another through skill sharing and preparation that often span generations. Historians still argue whether some communities maintained strictly structured winter roles, hunters, gatherers, firekeepers, or whether families adapted more fluidly based on who was healthiest, who was skilled, and who simply had the energy that day. The debate lingers because winter traditions varied so widely across regions, climates, and cultures. What was rigid in one area was flexible in another. You picture a few scholars hunched over heated debates, while somewhere in this frozen world, the ancestors they're discussing simply shrugged and did whatever needed to be done. Your boots scuff a patch of wind-polished ice, and you nearly slip, your arms flinging out with instant, undignified chaos. You recover, barely, and mutter something about the cold having a sense of humor. You're not imagining it. Either the land feels alive, not in the spooky, something is watching you way, but in the everything here interacts way. Snow traps scent, wind rearranges terrain, sunlight shifts temperatures by degrees that matter deeply when you depend on the land. The indigenous families who walked here knew that each morning demanded a moment of reading the environment the way you might read a weather app. Except you can't swipe left to avoid a blizzard. The valley floor greets you with a softer silence. The air feels thicker here, bundled in the shelter of surrounding hills. Tracks stitch the ground in faint patterns, long, straight lines that might be from a snowshoe rabbit and delicate hop marks of some small bird. You kneel to study them, and in doing so, you slip further into the mindset of those who survived here. A hunter might read these as breakfast, afternoon assurance, or evidence that wolves have passed through earlier. A child might read them as puzzles or stories. You read them as continuity, evidence that life persists even when the world feels frozen solid. You move again, feeling the subtle shift from observer to participant. Snow thickens around your ankles, and the sky brightens into a paler blue, carrying just the faintest hint may be imagined of warmer light. You realize that winter survival wasn't just about toughness, it was about rhythm. Families learned when to move and when to stay, when to hunt and when to rest, when to watch the sky and when to trust the ground. You're part of that rhythm now, even if only in this bedtime story. Ahead, a thin column of smoke spirals through the air, barely visible, but unmistakably human. A sign of shelter, a sign of family, a sign of warmth waiting beyond the next cluster of trees. And so you begin walking toward it, breath steady, steps deliberate, carrying the first quiet threads of a story that will continue to unfold, one snow-softened mile at a time. You move toward that faint ribbon of smoke, letting each step sink softly into the snow as the cold settles into your bones with a kind of stubborn patience. The frozen morning is quieter now, almost expectant, the way a room feels when someone pauses just before speaking. You pass through a narrow stand of fir trees, their branches bending under weighty frost, and as you brush against one, a small shower of powder drifts down your sleeve like nature, tapping your shoulder to say, "Pay attention." The air carries a faint, comforting scent of wood smoke. It pulls you forward, because where there is smoke, there is fire, and where there is fire, there is shelter. You reach a clearing that seems to materialize from the trees, as if the forest simply stepped aside. In the center sits a winter lodge, built with bark panels, thick hides, and carefully layered boughs. It is humble but sturdy, a small marvel of engineering created to keep out cold that feels almost personal in how aggressively it tries to seep into every gap. You approach slowly, running your gloved hand along one exterior wall. The bark feels rough, familiar, and surprisingly warm near the base. You can tell the builders knew exactly which materials could withstand both snow load and wind pressure. That knowledge came from centuries of adaptation, trial, and steady refinement. A mainstream historical fact nudges into your thoughts here. Many First Nations and Native American groups in colder regions constructed winter lodges with double walls insulated by moss or packed snow. The snow acted as a natural barrier against wind, turning something dangerous into something protective. You realize how elegantly simple and effective it is, and you briefly wonder why modern houses do not use the same trick more often. The cold does not wait for your philosophical detours, though. It wraps around your ankles like a clingy cat, urging you to get inside. You lift the hide flap and duck into the lodge. Warmth hits you immediately, not harsh or overwhelming, but slow and enveloping, like someone pressing a warm cloth to your frozen cheeks. The air smells of smoke, pine, and faintly of cooked meat. A small fire smolders in a pit at the center, its light flickering across the interior walls. Your eyes adjust, and you take in the shelter from within. The ceiling rises higher than you expect, creating a pocket that traps warm air. The walls are lined with fur blankets and woven mats, all carefully placed to block drafts and soften the space. Even the doorway is angled to prevent wind from rushing in. It feels intentional. It feels lived in. It feels safe. A quirky tidbit surfaces. In some northern communities, families once used layers of dried cattail fluff inside bedding as a kind of natural insulation. The fluff trapped heat extremely well and created a soft nest that rivaled modern down blankets. You cannot help imagining yourself curled inside a cattail cocoon, feeling smug about outsmarting winter using simple marsh plants. Maybe luxury bedding brands should take notes. You kneel beside the fire and warm your palms. The heat seeps upward through your fingers, melting the chill lodged in your joints. Quiet fills the lodge, not the cold, empty quiet of the outdoors, but a fuller one, shaped by crackling flames and soft breathing. You imagine families gathering here after long days, shedding ice from their boots, shaking off snow like dogs, lighting the space with laughter, plans, or the comfortable silence of people who trust one another completely. You notice the construction again. The inner supports are lashed together with rawhide strips. The bark walls are angled slightly inward near the top. There is a small vent above the fire, and yet almost no smoke hangs in the air. Every piece of the structure works in harmony with the others. Historians still argue whether certain winter lodge designs were strictly regional innovations, or whether knowledge passed more widely between nations across trade routes. Some claim independent invention. Others insist cultural exchange played a larger role. You simply sit here in the warmth and appreciate how well it works, whether born from one mind or many. Your eyes drift to a bundle of tools resting near the far wall. An ice scraper made from caribou bone, a wooden scoop carved so smoothly it shines in the firelight, a pair of snow goggles crafted from birch with narrow slits to reduce glare. You pick one up. The surface is polished by many hands. It feels warm despite being wood. You marvel at how every item seems to belong here, not just as tools but as extensions of the shelter itself. This lodge is not a house in the modern sense. It is a living system, an ecosystem shaped by human hands and environmental wisdom. The fire pops, sending a tiny ember dancing upward. It fizzles against the vent before disappearing. You inch closer, letting the warmth soak deeper, imagining what it would feel like to live through endless winter nights in such a place. You can almost hear children whispering stories from their blankets, parents mending clothing, elders humming soft songs that blend with the crackling fire. Your gaze shifts to the entrance flap. It moves gently with each current of air. Outside, daylight brightens, but the cold waits patiently. It always does. Winter is not aggressive. Winter is consistent, persistent, unapologetic. Families survive not by fighting it, but by understanding it, by shaping their homes to its rhythms, its temperatures, its moods. You think about how this shelter did not appear overnight. Every tree used in its construction was chosen with care. Bark panels were stripped during the warm months when they were flexible. Poles were cured for strength. Moss or grasses were gathered long before snow fell, dried, and stored for insulation. The lodge represents months of preparation for a season that demands respect. You feel that respect now, sitting in the dim glow, hands wrapped around your own warming breath. The crackle of the fire softens. You rise slowly and trace the wall with your fingertips. The smoothness of worn hide, the ridges of sown bark, the faint scent of pine pitch sealing gaps. Every choice here holds intention. Every detail helps families not only survive but live. There is comfort here. There is resourcefulness. There is ingenuity wrapped in simplicity. You step outside again, not because you want to leave the warmth, but because the story pulls you forward. The cold greets you immediately, but something has shifted. Shelter teaches confidence. Warmth teaches perspective. You now understand that winter is not an enemy. It is a teacher. It tests you, yes, but it also rewards preparation, creativity, and community. As you walk away from the lodge, the smoke curls behind you in a lazy spiral. You follow a new path leading deeper into the snowy world, toward families gathering by firelight, toward shared stories and quiet resilience, letting the shelter remain behind you like a promise that warmth can be shaped from even the harshest cold. You follow the narrow trail leading away from the winter lodge, your steps slow and deliberate as cold light filters through stands of snow-weighted branches. The air shifts as you move, taking on a warmer tint from the smoke that lingers on your clothing. Ahead, a faint glow pulses from behind a cluster of spruce trees. You know instinctively that the heart of winter survival is not only sturdy shelter, but also the way families gather around firelight, each flame stitching people together just as surely as thread binds hide. When you part the branches, you find a small winter camp nestled quietly in the hollow of a hill. A low fire crackles at its center, sending sparks upward, like tiny fire spirits on their own midnight errands. A semicircle of log seats surrounds it, worn smooth by countless hands and countless nights. You step closer, and the warmth greets your shins, rising in gentle waves, easing stiffness from your joints. For a moment, your whole body relaxes, as if winter finally loosened its grip. You lower yourself onto one of the logs. The wood is chilled, but the fire offsets it with a steady heat that feels almost affectionate. Sitting here, you notice how families once formed a constellation around their fires. Parents mended clothing, children whispered jokes, elders traced memories with slow hands. Firelight softened everything. Harsh lines faded, worries dimmed. Even exhaustion took on a manageable shape in the glow. A detail clearly noted in historical accounts surfaces gently. Many indigenous families not only cooked around the winter fire but also used it as the central gathering place for decision-making and daily teaching. The fire was less a tool and more a social anchor, a hearth that shaped rhythm and routine. As you sit watching the flames wiggle in the cold air, you feel that truth settle inside you. The fire is not simply warmth, it is structure, it is belonging. Your eyes drift toward a pot hanging over the embers. The steam rising from it smells faintly of roots, dried berries, and something savory you cannot quite name. The aroma wraps itself around your senses like a soft scarf. You imagine young ones leaning in, guessing what stew might be ready that night. Sometimes winter stews carried surprises. An uncommon ingredient here, a bit of frozen meat preserved since early autumn, or perhaps a handful of summer herbs that someone cleverly stored. A curious little piece of cultural trivia slips into your mind. Some northern communities threw a single heated stone into a pot of stew when ingredients were scarce, believing the stone shared the memory of richer meals cooked before. You smile at the thought. Whether symbolic or simply practical, it feels like something you would try if winter pressed you too tightly. The flames snap, scattering a few sparks onto the packed snow. Shadows dance across the camp, sliding over tree trunks and bare branches. It creates the illusion that the forest itself is breathing slowly in sync with the fire. You shift your hands toward the flame and tilt your head, listening for what stories might have lived here. Families told tales to pass long nights, but also to pass knowledge. Stories explained why certain animals were respected, why certain stars guided hunters home, how to read signs in snow without overthinking. In the glow of fire, knowledge did not feel like work. It felt like conversation between generations. A question flickers through your mind, soft and hesitant. How did families maintain harmony during such long, close quarters in winter months? Days were short, nights were long, food was limited, cold pressed into every crack. Yet accounts from oral histories show a remarkable level of cooperation. People moved with patience, each role understood and supported, not because things were easy, but because surviving the frozen wilderness required harmony, the way a drum requires resonance. You absorb that lesson while staring at the fire. Survival was communal, never isolated. You look toward the edge of the camp. A few drying racks stand beside a cedar tree. Strips of smoked meat hang neatly in rows, darkened by fire and time. Each piece represents effort from earlier seasons. Every harvest had to stretch through the cold months. Families prepared caches of dried fish, smoked venison, roasted nuts, stored roots, and more. Your stomach gives a quiet nudge, reminding you that while this is only a bedtime story for you, hunger would have been a constant companion for those who lived the real version. Winter demanded forethought as much as courage. Close to the drying racks, you notice a small basket woven from reeds. Inside rests a bundle of herbs, brittle yet aromatic. The scent drifts into the air, earthy and calming. Something in you senses that these were not only for cooking, but also for creating comfort. Herbal blends placed in winter bedding added fragrance and offered gentle reassurance. It is such a small thing, yet it reveals so much about how families tended to both physical and emotional warmth. A soft gust of wind pushes a bit of smoke toward you. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the smell drift through your senses. It is soothing and grounding. When you open your eyes again, you take in the camp from a different angle. The slope of the hill shields it from the harshest winds. The fire sits slightly below ground level for protection and for efficient heat. Nothing here is accidental. Every placement reflects understanding of cold and wind patterns. Some researchers remain divided about whether winter camps were always stationary throughout the cold season or whether certain families shifted slightly as conditions changed. Some point to archaeological evidence suggesting multi-week stability, while others highlight oral accounts describing midwinter adjustments when food grew scarce or storms rerouted travel paths. You consider that debate while brushing frost from your sleeve. The truth might be somewhere in between. Flexibility was likely the true tradition. People moved when necessary, stayed when possible, adapted when forced, and rested when nature allowed it. You lean back and let the fire's glow warm your face. It creates the illusion of thawing the very air between you and the forest. Snowflakes drift from the treetops in slow spirals, each one catching the firelight for a brief, delicate second before settling quietly on the ground. Watching them fall feels strangely hypnotic. They remind you that winter is not just danger. It is beauty too, beauty that flourishes quietly, even in difficult places. Sitting here, you start to understand the emotional resilience required to face months of cold. Families leaned on stories, small comforts, shared meals, and the steady glow of firelight. They created warmth with more than fire. They created it with connection. You imagine someone passing a small bowl of stew to you now, nodding with a tired but gentle smile, as if to say you are part of the circle too. Gradually, the fire settles into deeper embers. The air cools a little, reminding you that the world outside this camp remains vast, frozen, and waiting for your next steps. You rise slowly, brushing snow from your boots. Before you leave, you take one last look at the flickering orange glow. It feels like a heartbeat in the snow-bound landscape. You turn toward the shadowed trail leading beyond the camp. The warmth of the fire lingers on your skin even as the cold begins to reclaim its space. Ahead lies a quieter stretch of wilderness where families once tracked life through silence, reading footprints the way others read text. You breathe deeply, steadying yourself, and continue walking, carrying the memory of the fire as a tiny ember glowing inside you. You slip back into the quiet forest. leaving the gentle glow of firelight behind as your boots sink into fresh powder that hushes even your breath. The trail narrows into a corridor of shadows where branches arch overhead like an icy cathedral. Here, sound behaves differently. Every step feels amplified while the world around you holds its breath. You move slowly, becoming aware that this is the landscape where indigenous hunters once read the snowy ground, the way you might read a page of familiar handwriting. The first tracks you notice are delicate, tiny dots pressed into the snow in neat rhythmic spacing. A small bird, probably a ptarmigan, weaving through the underbrush in search of seeds. You kneel and trace the impressions with your gloved fingers. The cold bites at your knuckles, but curiosity warms you enough to stay. Tracks like these were once part of morning lessons for children, subtle clues that taught patience and perception. The snow was not an obstacle. It was a giant canvas that recorded every movement in crisp detail. A little farther ahead, you spot something different. Larger, deeper indentations, arranged in parallel pairs. Snowshoe hare. You follow the trail for a few quiet paces, listening for the rustle of fur or the faint thump of hind legs. The forest remains silent except for a soft groan from a distant tree adjusting to the weight of ice. The hush presses in on you, making every small sound feel important, almost instructional. You realize how much attention winter demands, how easily a missed detail could mean losing the trail of a meal or overlooking the warning signs of a predator. A bit of knowledge backed by historical descriptions rises gently into your thoughts. Many indigenous hunters could identify not only the species but also the age, direction, and even the emotional state of an animal based solely on tracks. A deeper indentation at the toe meant the creature leaped in haste. A tight cluster of prints revealed hesitation. Smooth, consistent spacing meant the animal felt unthreatened. You study the tracks beneath you and imagine someone from centuries ago standing in your exact footprint, interpreting the same snowy clues with practiced ease. Snow flurries drift around you as you walk, settling in thin layers along branches and eyelashes. Each flake seems to catch your attention for a moment, floating like a silent messenger before melting against your warmth. The deeper you go, the more signs you notice. A line of fox prints veering off toward a thicket. A subtle depression where a deer rested overnight. A series of disturbed drifts where wind funneled through a narrow gap in the trees. Every detail contributes to the larger story of how life moves through winter. Then you find something that makes you pause. A long, curving track, edged with faint drag marks. You crouch to examine it. The snow has been compressed in a way that suggests weight and rhythm. A caribou, perhaps, or a single file line of families pulling sleds across terrain. The edges of the track have crusted with a thin glaze of ice, meaning the trail is several hours old. You imagine following it deeper into the forest, stepping into its story as if turning the next page of a book. A small flash of memory, like information, whispers into your thoughts. In some northern regions, hunters used a technique of laying their ears to the ground to detect distant movement under snow, listening for vibrations carried through the frozen earth. It sounds almost mystical, but it was grounded in practical skill and sharp senses. You smile a little, picturing yourself pressing your ear dramatically to the snow only to immediately decide it is far too cold for that kind of dedication. You straighten and continue deeper into the quiet. The forest feels older here, as if your movement wakes something ancient that has been dreaming beneath the snow. You hear a faint rustle to your left, but it fades quickly. You tell yourself it was probably just a squirrel with a busy agenda. The truth is that winter forests always host more life than you expect, hidden in hollow logs, tucked beneath fallen branches, curled into burrows warmed with moss. Survival is not only grand gestures and heroic hunts, it is also small lives living steady, determined routines. After a few more minutes of slow walking, you come across a set of impressions that makes you stop again. They are unusually wide, with toes splayed slightly and the outline softened by drifting flakes. Wolf tracks. Fresh. You study them closely. The paws point in a straight line, suggesting purposeful movement. You feel a slight shiver, not of fear, but of respect. Wolves were both competitors and teachers. Families watched their patterns closely, learning from how wolves followed caribou herds or avoided weak ice. Today, these tracks remind you that you are not the only traveler in this snowy world. There is a question that researchers continue to consider. Did hunters always travel alone when tracking game, or did some communities prefer paired scouting even in deep winter? Different accounts offer different patterns. Some elders describe solitary movement as essential for silence. Others recall cooperative tracking that allowed communication through subtle signals. You look down at the wolf tracks again and wonder if the answer is simply that people, like wolves, adapted their methods based on season, terrain, and necessity. You rise and breathe deeply. The cold air fills your lungs like a sharpened clarity. You follow the path of tracks a short distance before choosing to veer off. You are not here to chase any creature. You are here to understand what it meant to read winter. And out here, understanding grows slowly, not in leaps but in quiet steps. As you move through the forest, your awareness expands. You hear more. You see more. The crunch of snow under your feet changes pitch depending on depth. The light shifts subtly as clouds pass. You sense the direction of wind without needing to check. You begin to understand why tracking was not merely a skill, but a way of seeing the world. Eventually, the trees thin, and the landscape opens into a wide stretch where wind sculpts ripples across the snow like frozen waves. Tracks vanish here, erased by restless air. You pause at the edge, taking in the blankness. It feels both daunting and inviting, a reminder that winter constantly rewrites the land. Hunters had to adapt to that too, reading what remained when clues disappeared. You take one last look at the forest behind you, knowing every print and indentation told a story you were lucky to glimpse. Ahead lies the frozen world of hidden food, icy waterways, and resourceful foraging. You draw your fur collar closer and step forward, letting the untouched snow become your next blank page. You step out onto a broader stretch of white that gleams beneath a pale sky. You feel the cold settle differently here. The forest behind you offered cover and clues, but this open space feels exposed, honest, and full of secrets tucked under the ice. The wind brushes across the plain like a long, slow breath. It nudges your hood, stings your cheeks, and carries the faint scent of frozen water. You sense a shift in the story, as if the land itself is gently reminding you that tracking is only one part of winter survival. Now you must learn how families once coaxed food from an environment that offered almost nothing freely. You walk toward the slight dip in the land where the glimmer of a frozen pond lies waiting beneath a thin veil of drifting snow. The surface looks polished and still. You crouch by the edge and brush away a layer of frost with the back of your glove. Smooth ice shines beneath your touch, clear enough that you imagine shapes shifting in the depths below. Fish, dormant but alive. Plants caught in winter stasis. The promise of food, if you know how to reach it. A memory drawn from historical practices surfaces quietly. Many indigenous communities developed techniques for winter fishing long before iron tools appeared. Some carved holes in the ice using bone-tipped chisels or stone picks that seemed almost delicate yet performed with surprising durability. Others kept narrow fishing holes open by placing snow shields around them to block wind and prevent refreezing. As you look at the frozen pond, you can almost hear the rhythmic tapping of a chisel against ice, echoing across a silent morning. You imagine kneeling beside a small opening in the ice with a spear tipped in antler or sharpened wood. The water would appear dark and swirling, the kind of darkness that makes you hold your breath without meaning to. Hunters waited with stillness so profound it almost felt like meditation. Every ripple mattered. Every glint of movement signaled hope. When a fish drifted close, the spear flashed downward. Quick, precise, necessary. You rise from the pond edge and take a few steps toward a cluster of low shrubs dusted with snow. You bend closer, brushing aside a layer of frost to reveal the brittle remains of berries that once clung to the branches. These were not summer berries bursting with sweetness. Winter offered only the leftovers, the shriveled fruits that resisted cold through stubbornness rather than abundance. Yet families knew how to gather what remained. They plucked frozen berries to boil into broths, to mix with fat for travel snacks, or to simply chew on for a burst of energy. You pick one now in your imagination, feeling its icy shell crack under your teeth, releasing a tangy note that tastes like survival rather than luxury. A strange but delightful piece of cultural trivia drifts into your thoughts. Some northern groups stored autumn berries inside hollowed pieces of birch bark buried beneath the snow, where the temperature remained cold enough to preserve them, but stable enough to keep them from turning brittle. You picture a family unwrapping one of these small bark containers in midwinter, opening it like a gift from warmer months. Inside, a few vivid berries glow with their original color, tiny sparks of summer in a world of white. You continue walking, your boots crunching steadily as you approach a small ridge. The wind here has carved shallow waves across the snow. You follow one of the rippled lines and notice something interesting. Beneath a thin crust of ice and snow, a mound rises slightly. You tap it with your heel and hear a hollow thud, a cache. Someone long ago stored food here, packing it beneath snow and insulating it with layers of pine boughs. Caches kept food cold but protected from scavengers. They were winter treasure chests built by skill and foresight. You kneel and brush snow aside. Even though the cache before you is only a suggestion imagined into existence from stories you have absorbed, you can picture what once filled these hidden pits. Smoked fish wrapped in bark, dried venison tied in bundles, roots collected before the first frost, maybe even slabs of frozen marrow tucked into the center for nourishment when the cold felt too sharp to bear. Opening such a cache in the middle of winter would have felt like striking gold. Not greedy gold, gratitude gold. You stand again, letting your gaze sweep across the plain. Farther ahead, the land dips into a marshy area now frozen solid. Tall reeds poke through the ice like dry paintbrushes. Their brittle tips rattle in the light wind. You walk toward them, intrigued by their resilience. Cattails once grew here in abundance. Even in winter, families found ways to harvest the starchy cores of cattail roots by breaking through the ice and digging with gloved hands. The roots were boiled into pastes, cooked into cakes, and even dried for storage. You step onto the frozen marsh, the surface shifting slightly under your weight. You imagine kneeling here, fingers numb but determined, tugging a root free while cold mud clings to your gloves. A thread of uncertainty drifts into your mind. Some researchers continue to discuss whether winter foraging followed strict patterns or whether families adapted freely based on the year's conditions. Accounts vary, reflecting the diversity of languages, landscapes, and traditions. Some regions offered reliable plants even in cold months. Others required a constant blend of fishing, hunting, and creative gathering. Standing here on the frozen marsh, you realize that the debate matters less than the truth that people always found ways to adapt. Adaptation was not theory. It was instinct. You leave the marsh and follow a narrow frozen stream that winds between two low hills. Along its edge, you see impressions in the snow caused by someone kneeling repeatedly. You pause, studying them. Ice fishing spots. Someone once sat here with patience and confidence, trusting that the water beneath the surface held life waiting to be coaxed upward. The thought humbles you. Winter foraging was not random. It was practiced with a quiet discipline that feels admirable even across centuries. The stream leads you toward a cluster of spruce trees heavy with snow. You brush your hand along one branch. Snow falls in a soft cascade, revealing the needles beneath. The scent is sharp and clean. Resin and cold air. You breathe it in and feel clarity spreading through your ribs. Spruce tips, harvested in their tender spring stage, were often dried and kept for winter teas rich in vitamin C. Families sipped these teas to prevent scurvy long before explorers worried about such things. It is astonishing how knowledge hidden in daily rituals could have saved countless travelers who never thought to ask. You move past the trees and reach a small slope where the snow has been disturbed. You kneel and see the faint outline of a trap imprint. Perhaps a simple loop snare, made from rawhide or twisted fiber, once lay here. Small game provided reliable protein during lean months. Setting traps required both patience and understanding of animal habits. Hunters placed snares along narrow paths, near burrows, or beside tree roots where rabbits and other creatures traveled frequently. You run your glove through the snow and imagine checking traps at dawn, finding just enough to feed a family for another day. The sky shifts as you continue walking. Pale gold spreads across thin clouds, hinting at afternoon light. Long shadows trail behind you. Winter light is fleeting, a soft visitor rather than a bold presence. Families learn to work within its limits. Gathering, chopping, fishing, trapping, everything had to be timed well, because darkness arrived early and brought its own challenges. You approach a stand of birch trees with pale trunks that glow against the snow. Birch bark provided more than building material. It burned quickly even when damp, making it essential for starting fires in cold months. It also carried natural oils that resisted rot, allowing families to fashion containers for storing winter foods. You peel a tiny strip of bark from a fallen piece and examine its layered texture. It feels light and unexpectedly strong, like something designed specifically for human hands. As you stand there, breathing in the crisp scent of birch, you sense that winter foraging is not simply about finding food. It is about cultivating a relationship with the land where nothing is wasted. Every part of a plant, every scrap of a root, every fish pulled from under the ice. Survival is not a conquest, it is a conversation. And your conversation with the land is not finished. Ahead, the horizon gleams with a new promise. Families once clothed themselves in warmth shaped from seasons past. The frozen wilderness demands protection, and you are about to step into a world of furs, hides, and craftsmanship that turned cold into comfort. You step away from the birch trees and follow the quiet slope downward until the forest gathers close again, its shadows stretching long fingers across the snow. The air changes here. It feels thicker, softer, as if every sound is bundled under layers of silence. You sense you are walking into a place where warmth is crafted rather than found, where families shaped protection with patient hands long before winter had the chance to bite. The trail bends slightly, leading you toward a small clearing. Hanging from a sturdy spruce branch is a cured hide swaying gently in the cold breeze. Its surface gleams faintly, smooth in some places and textured in others, like a map of past seasons. Someone once scraped and stretched it with meticulous care, softening it until it became supple enough to wrap around a body. You stop before it, imagining the hours of labor that transformed raw skin into something warm enough to keep life steady through frozen months. You run your glove across the hide. It creaks quietly. You feel a softness beneath the firmness, the kind of softness that comes only from repeated handling, from experienced fingers smoothing and working the material until it responds like fabric. Many indigenous communities developed a deep mastery of hide preparation. One grounded detail that historians have recorded is that brain tanning, a method using the natural oils found in animal brains, produced remarkably soft and durable leather. The process required soaking, stretching, smoking, and endless patience, transforming a simple hide into a garment capable of shrugging off winter itself. You picture someone kneeling by a rack, stretching a newly cleaned hide with a bone scraper shaped like a crescent. The tool glides across the surface in rhythmic strokes. A fire burns nearby, sending up lazy curls of smoke that will later infuse the hide, giving it flexibility and a smell that lingers for years. The work is steady and calm, almost meditative. Even children would help, learning how to recognize when a hide was ready for the next step. This was not simply craft. It was heritage passed through hands rather than words. A small mound of snow catches your attention. You brush it aside and discover a bundle of furs half buried for storage. You unfold one cautiously. It is thick and plush, with guard hairs shimmering like frost lit by starlight. Perhaps it once belonged to a wolf or a lynx, animals whose winter coats were dense with warmth. You pull it gently across your shoulders and feel the instant transformation. The cold still nips your nose and cheeks, but your core relaxes under the weight of the fur. You suddenly understand why so many winter garments were layered rather than relying on a single piece. Warmth comes from creating small pockets where air settles and insulates, a natural collaboration between body and clothing. A small, slightly whimsical detail floats into your mind. In some regions, people stitched jingling ornaments made from hollowed bone or carved antler onto winter garments, not for decoration alone but to help locate children when deep snow muffled sound. Imagine tiny bells softly chiming through snowfall, a gentle reassurance that the little wanderers were not far. The idea warms you unexpectedly, a reminder that survival was not only serious work but also full of tender creativity. You continue walking, carrying the fur across your arms. Ahead, a partially constructed winter parka rests on a wooden frame. The seams are fine and tight. Strips of sinew, carefully twisted and dried, hold the pieces together with a strength that rivals modern thread. You touch one seam and marvel at how precise it is. The person who stitched this knew exactly how to align fibers so that the final garment would withstand wind that feels sharp enough to carve stone. Some researchers still discuss the origins of certain stitching patterns found in winter garments across different regions. Were the similarities evidence of shared ancestry, traveling artisans, or simply nature guiding people toward the most efficient design? The debate has never reached full agreement, a reminder that winter clothing, like winter survival, was shaped by countless individual and communal choices layered over centuries. You pick up a pair of boots resting beside the frame. They are lined with fur turned inward, soft enough to cradle bare feet. The outer layer is tougher, likely made from moose hide or caribou leather. You slip your hand inside and feel warmth cling instantly to your skin. In some northern communities, families tucked dried moss inside boots to absorb moisture and maintain insulation. You can almost feel the gentle cushioning of that moss now, a surprising comfort in a world that seems built from ice. As you turn the boots in your hands, you notice how the soles are slightly curved. They seem designed to glide across snow rather than sink into it. Every detail serves a purpose. Protect the foot, keep warmth in, shed snow efficiently. Nothing about these garments is accidental. Winter demands intention with every stitch, every cut, every choice. You drape the boots over your arm and move deeper into the clearing. A long coat hangs from a wooden peg driven into a tree trunk. The coat is adorned with small quillwork patterns made from dyed porcupine quills pressed into softened hide. The colors have faded slightly, but the design remains intricate. These patterns are more than decoration. They can mark family lineage, convey stories, or simply reflect an artist's joy in adding beauty to necessity. You trace one pattern with your fingertip, feeling the subtle ridges. The coat carries warmth, protection, and identity all at once. You pause and look around. Every garment here speaks of survival, but also of self-expression. Families did not simply endure winter. They lived in it, shaped it, claimed it. Clothing did not just protect the body. It declared creativity, belonging, resourcefulness, and pride. Even in the coldest months, beauty had a place. A gust of wind sweeps across the clearing, lifting the edges of the coats and rustling branches overhead. You pull the borrowed fur more tightly around your shoulders. The forest seems to nod in approval, as if acknowledging that you now understand what clothing meant in this frozen world. Not luxury, not fashion, but resilience, crafted stitch by stitch. You take a few steps toward the far end of the clearing. There, leaning against a snow-laden log, rests a pair of snowshoes made from bent wood and webbed sinew. Their presence hints at your next journey. Winter clothing kept people warm, but tools allowed them to travel. The frozen wilderness is immense, and families once moved across it with quiet efficiency, guided by wisdom passed down through countless winters. You adjust the fur one last time, breathe deeply, and prepare yourself. Ahead lies the art of gliding across snow, pulling sleds, and covering long distances through a world where silence rules. You stand at the edge of the clearing, the cold brushing your cheeks as you look down at the snowshoes leaning against the log. Their wooden frames curve gently like frozen smiles, and the sinew lacing creates a delicate pattern that looks almost too beautiful to step on. You reach for one, feeling the smoothness of the bent wood beneath your fingers. It is light, almost deceptively so, and yet strong enough to carry a person across deep snow without sinking. You understand immediately why these tools became extensions of winter travelers rather than mere equipment. You slip your foot into the binding. The fit is snug but forgiving. When you test your weight, the snow beneath you holds firm. Your other foot slides into its snowshoe, and suddenly you feel different, taller, as if the earth has risen to meet you halfway. You take your first step. The snowshoe glides smoothly across the powder, distributing your weight in a way that feels almost like floating. Your next step is even easier. Soon you find yourself moving with a rhythm that feels natural, as though you have done this 100 times before. A detail drawn from historical accounts drifts into your mind. Many indigenous nations crafted snowshoes that were distinct in shape and purpose. Some were long and narrow for speed across open terrain. Others were wide and rounded for maneuvering through dense forest. Still, others had long pointed tails to stabilize movement. The diversity reflected not only creativity, but also a deep understanding of each region's wind, snow type, and landscape. You glance at your own pair and realize how carefully every bend and weave must have been calculated. You glide forward through the trees. The sensation is strange at first, almost like walking on the surface of a frozen cloud. The snow shifts beneath you, yet you remain suspended. This is winter travel as it was meant to be. Quiet, graceful, efficient. You sense how families once moved along these same routes carrying supplies, leading children, guiding sleds pulled by dogs or by sheer human strength. Long journeys that would exhaust you on foot become gentle progressions when aided by proper tools. The forest thins ahead, revealing a wide path flattened by years of seasonal movement. You follow it, noticing how the snowshoe tracks you leave behind form elongated impressions that echo ancient patterns. The trail curves slightly toward a cluster of small hills, where the wind whistles faintly between ridges. You stop for a moment to feel the direction of the breeze. Winter travelers could read winds almost like language. A strong current from the north hinted at storms. A warm breeze from the southwest meant mild days ahead, or melting ice that could complicate river crossings. You take another step and hear the soft swish of your snowshoes cutting across the powder. The sound is soothing, rhythmic, a metronome that guides your pace. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the world become sound, scent, and sensation. Distant birds call sporadically. Tree trunks crackle as the cold expands their fibers. In the quiet, you imagine a long line of travelers moving with you, parents guiding children, elders moving steadily with practiced ease. Dogs trotting ahead with tails raised like living banners, everyone bound together by the necessity of movement and the comfort of companionship. A memory of a lesser-known detail surfaces. Some winter travelers use sleds carved from single slabs of wood, polished with animal fat to glide more easily. The sleds carried everything from firewood to tools to sleeping bundles. In certain regions, long snow toboggans called carriole sleds were designed to bend slightly over uneven terrain, making them surprisingly agile. You imagine gripping a rope, tugging such a sled behind you as you cross this snowy landscape. The weight would pull at your arms, but the momentum and the smoothness of the ride would make it manageable. As you continue forward, the trail slopes gently downward. You shift your weight instinctively, learning that snowshoes respond best to motion that is deliberate yet relaxed. Too stiff, and you lose balance. Too casual, and you risk tripping. You find yourself moving with surprising confidence, letting your legs guide you as if they have inherited ancient instructions. At the bottom of the slope, you see tracks left by a different kind of traveler. Long parallel grooves cut through the snow. Sled trails. They stretch into the distance, disappearing between trees. You kneel beside the tracks, touching the compressed snow. Families once traveled in winter caravans, pulling supplies from one camp to the next, or meeting relatives for seasonal gatherings that brought warmth to the cold. Sled trails connected not only places, but also hearts. They were winter pathways of trade, friendship, and kinship. A question that researchers often revisit drifts into your thoughts. Did winter travelers always rely on dog teams, or were human-pulled sleds more common? Evidence varies widely depending on region and era. Some communities used powerful dog teams for longer journeys, while others relied primarily on human strength and teamwork. The truth likely shifts across landscapes, shaped by snow depth, available resources, and cultural practice. Standing here, you can imagine both. A line of dogs pulling eagerly, or a group of people chanting softly, keeping rhythm with every coordinated pull. You stand again and adjust your snowshoes. The cold nips your face, reminding you that winter travel is not merely technique, it is endurance, it is will. It is the steady trust that each step brings you closer to what you need. Families once walked miles like this, day after day, guided by landmarks half buried under snow. A crooked tree trunk, a ridge of darker stone, a bend in a frozen stream. You feel the world expand around you as you walk. Distance becomes something manageable. The horizon no longer seems far. The snowshoes carry you gently across the surface, turning a harsh landscape into a navigable world. You glide past the edge of a frozen meadow where wind carves patterns into the snow. The shapes twist and ripple like the imprint of invisible waves. As you reach the far end of the meadow, you remove one snowshoe, then the other. You hold them in your hands, feeling grateful for their simple elegance. Ahead, the trail begins to climb toward a plateau. You sense another form of movement waiting there, a place where goods and stories were traded, even in the deepest cold. Winter was not only for traveling, it was for connecting. You take a breath, steady and warm, and walk toward the rising land, ready to join the frozen trade routes that shaped winter relationships. You climb the gentle rise leading out of the meadow, the snow crunching softly under your boots as the landscape widens. The cold air brushes your lips and settles inside your lungs with that familiar sting, but now your body knows the rhythm of winter travel. Every breath feels steadier, every step more assured. As you crest the slope, the wind changes direction, carrying with it a faint, almost musical murmur. You pause, listening. It is the sound of movement, of people, of quiet voices drifting across the snow. Ahead, nestled between two long ridges, lies a winter gathering place. It is not a bustling market like those in warmer months, but a modest meeting ground that families and small groups used when conditions allowed travel. Smoke rises in thin threads from several fire pits. A few sleds rest half buried in snow, their loads neatly covered with woven mats. You walk toward the first cluster of people, feeling the warmth of connection even before you feel the heat of any fire. A group stands over a low table made from lashed branches. On its surface rests a variety of items. Strips of smoked meat bundled neatly with sinew, wrapped packets of dried berries. Rolls of hide tied into compact spirals. You recognize the purpose immediately. Winter trade. The quiet exchange of goods, stories, and news. Even in the coldest months, movement across territories allowed families to strengthen alliances and share resources that not everyone could gather alone. A detail supported by historical research slips gently into your mind. Many indigenous nations relied on winter trade networks that linked distant communities through efficient snow travel. Snowshoes, sleds, and frozen waterways made long distances shorter. Winter, surprisingly, could be the easiest season for moving goods, as firm snow offered smoother travel than muddy spring or thick summer brush. You feel that truth in your bones as you look at the well-worn paths radiating from this little meeting place. You approach one of the traders who is unrolling a bundle of hides. The smell of smoke and tanned leather rises into the air. He offers the hides with a quiet nod. In exchange, someone hands him a pouch filled with dried fish mixed with fat. You watch the exchange unfold with a calm, slow rhythm. No rush, no loud bargaining. Winter encourages patience, after all. Voices remain low to conserve warmth. Movements stay deliberate to conserve energy. A particularly charming detail emerges in your memory. Some families traveling to winter gatherings carried small carved tokens or beadwork pieces, meant not for trade but as gestures of goodwill. These tokens acted as reminders of relationships. Tiny gifts slipped into hands with no expectation except continued friendship. You imagine one of those tokens now, a little bone carving of an animal, cool to the touch but warm with intention. You wander through the clearing. People stand in small groups, sharing stories along with goods. A traveler describes the thickness of lake ice farther north. Another speaks of a herd of caribou spotted days earlier. News travels differently in winter. It is not shouted. It is shared gently, like passing a fragile object hand to hand. Near one fire, an elder warms their hands while speaking softly to a younger traveler. You glance their way, pretending not to listen but absorbing the tone. The words flow like slow water, carrying guidance shaped by decades of winter journeys. In some regions, elders taught specific winter trade customs to younger generations, ensuring respectful exchange that honored boundaries and traditions. You sense that happening here now, quietly, with the snow absorbing every syllable. You move toward another group gathered around a sled loaded with long bundles. Someone unties a covering, revealing carved tools fashioned with careful skill. Ice picks, scrapers, long-handled spoons, and fishing lures shaped from bone or antler. The craftsmanship makes you pause. Every tool carries evidence of hours of patient labor, each one a promise of usefulness through the harsh months. You imagine how satisfying it must have felt to trade for such an item, knowing it would serve you well through hunger, cold, and storms. You also notice bundles of herbs tied with thin strips of bark. Their scent drifts faintly in the cold air. Winter medicine traveled along these routes too. Families shared healing roots and dried plants that helped with coughs, sore muscles, or sleepless nights. The exchange was not only practical but deeply caring. To share medicine was to share protection. There is a lingering question that scholars have often discussed. Were these winter gatherings primarily for trade, or were they just as important for maintaining social bonds, arranging future visits, and renewing alliances? Different accounts portray different emphases, and the truth likely shifts with each group and each winter. Standing here, watching people exchange both goods and warm glances, you sense that winter trade had never been just about objects. It was about community surviving together. You continue walking, your boots sinking slightly in the packed snow between the fires. Children play near one of the sleds, their laughter muted by the cold but unmistakably bright. They chase each other, leaving small crisscrossing tracks that overlap like a woven pattern. Their presence reminds you that not all winter moments were serious. Even in a frozen world, joy had room to flicker. Another trader crouches beside a stack of birch bark containers. Inside some of them you glimpse nuts, dried roots, and what looks like rendered fat shaped into round cakes for travel. The scent of dried fish hangs in the air. A pot simmering nearby whispers with bubbles as steam curls upward, carrying the fragrant promise of winter stew. You step closer to the pot, letting the warmth of the fire brush your face. Someone ladles broth into a wooden cup and hands it to you with a small smile. You cradle the cup, feeling the heat seep into your gloves. The first sip warms you from the inside, a brothy mixture of fish, roots, and herbs that tells a story of careful storage and wise use of resources. As you stand there, sipping the steaming broth, you realize that winter trade is not just an exchange of objects or information, It is an exchange of encouragement, of reassurance, of human presence in a landscape that sometimes feels too vast. You finish the cup, hand it back with gratitude, and step aside to watch the bustle continue. Eventually, the meeting ground grows quieter as people begin to pack their sleds. The sky has shifted toward a deeper shade. Snow clouds gather on the horizon. You sense that it is time for the travelers to move again before the weather closes in. One by one, groups head toward their chosen paths, leaving behind only soft trails in the snow. You follow a different path, one that winds toward a cluster of trees where a faint, herbal scent drifts on the air. Something warm and healing waits there. Winter survival was not only about food or trade, it was also about tending the body when cold and exhaustion weighed heavily. You breathe deeply and walk toward the trees, ready to step into the world of winter medicine. You follow the narrow trail leading away from the trading ground, your boots sinking into snow that feels softer here, as if the earth is cushioning each step in anticipation of what lies ahead. A thin ribbon of steam rises in the distance, drifting through the trees like a quiet invitation. As you move closer, the air changes. It carries a faint blend of spruce, dried berries, and something subtly sweet that lingers on your tongue even before you breathe it in fully. You realize you are approaching a winter healing lodge, a place where families tended bodies worn down by cold, hunger, and constant movement. The lodge sits tucked between tall evergreens, their branches forming a natural windbreak. A thin layer of smoke escapes from a small opening in the roof. Warm light glows from inside, flickering gently through gaps in the hide covering the entrance. You lift the flap and step in, greeted by a wash of fragrant heat that clings to your skin like a comforting hand. The interior feels close and dim, but not cramped. It feels intentional, like a womb carved from winter. A low fire burns in the center of the lodge. Over it hangs a pot filled with a dark, bubbling mixture of herbs. The scent curls upward, rich and earthy. You kneel beside the fire and let the warmth seep into your limbs. Families once depended on winter medicine with a seriousness that feels reverent. When frostbite nipped fingers, when coughing lingered too long, when fatigue crept into bones like slow-moving ice, healers stepped forward with knowledge passed down through generations. A grounded fact from traditional practices hums quietly into your thoughts. Many indigenous communities used spruce resin as a natural antiseptic. When mixed with warm water or boiled into a salve, it soothed cuts, sore joints, and respiratory ailments brought on by frigid air. You picture a healer kneeling exactly where you sit now, grinding resin with a flat river stone, mixing it slowly into a warm paste that would ease pain and protect against infection. You turn toward a rack near the wall where bundles of dried plants hang in neat rows, cedar boughs tied with bark strips, willow branches stripped of their bark, stems of yarrow, mint, and wild rose hips. You run your fingers along one of the bundles and feel its brittle texture. Each plant carries its own quiet power. Some ease the stomach, some warm the blood, some calm the spirit. Even in the deepest cold, the memory of summer remains in these bundles, a reminder that healing is not confined to one season. You catch sight of a small bowl resting beside the fire. Inside, tiny brown seeds glisten as though kissed with frost. A curious detail you once heard swims into focus. In some regions, people chewed the seeds of wild bergamot or sage to relieve sore throats caused by dry winter air. The aroma freshened breathing passages and warmed the chest, offering comfort through long nights when coughing threatened sleep. You imagine placing one of those seeds under your tongue now, feeling it release its sharp, warming flavor. The healer enters the lodge quietly, their footsteps barely pressing into the ground. They carry a wooden cup filled with steaming liquid and gesture for you to hold it. You wrap your hands around the cup, surprised by how quickly the heat slides into your palms. The mixture tastes slightly bitter at first, then mellow, then soothing. It feels as though the warmth travels deep into your chest, loosening something you did not know was tight. Near the far wall sits a pile of heated stones covered with a folded hide. You look at them with curiosity. Families often used steam baths even in the coldest months. Stones heated in the fire were placed in shallow pits, wetted with herb-infused water, and surrounded by cedar or spruce boughs to create a fragrant steam. It eased muscles strained from travel, helped lungs recover from icy air, and offered a rare moment of comfort. The steam filled the lodge with a mist that carried both warmth and scent, easing minds as much as bodies. Another thought surfaces, one that researchers sometimes revisit when exploring traditional winter healing. Some communities believed that certain winter ailments were not merely physical, but spiritual imbalances aggravated by isolation or fear. Healing, then, required more than herbs. It required song, touch, and the presence of trusted relatives. Sitting here now, watching the fire cast gentle shadows, you understand how deeply such presence matters in a landscape that can feel lonely and immense. You glance at a small rattle resting near the fire pit. It is made from a hollowed gourd or perhaps a carved piece of bone, filled with dried seeds. A healer might shake it softly to accompany a soothing chant. The sound would blend with the crackle of the fire and the soft hiss of the steaming pot, weaving a pattern of calm that settled like snowflakes on the mind. You imagine the gentle rhythm now, a heartbeat made audible. The healer places a bowl of warm spruce tea beside you. The scent is crisp and bright, like breathing in early spring. Spruce needles, when steeped, offered vitamin C that prevented sickness caused by winter scarcity. Families understood this long before explorers recorded scurvy in their journals. You sip carefully, letting the flavor roll through your senses. You notice a thick fur blanket resting beside the fire. You lift it and feel its incredible softness. Someone recovering from illness would have been wrapped in such a blanket, with the fire warming their feet and a cup of herbal tea resting at their side. You picture a child curled inside one, soothed by whispered words from a grandparent. Winter healing was not only medicine, it was comfort given shape. A question flickers at the edge of your mind. How much of winter healing was shared between distant nations, and how much developed independently? Some oral histories mention the spread of healing songs and herbal knowledge along trade routes. Others emphasize local expertise, shaped by the specific plants of a region. The answer remains layered and complex, like the scent inside this lodge. Your breath mingles with the warm air as you consider the wisdom contained in every bundle hanging from the walls. You finish your tea and stand slowly. The healer nods in quiet acknowledgement. You push open the hide flap and step back into the bright cold. The air feels gentler now, softened by the warmth in your chest. Snow sparkles around you, as if welcoming you back into its vastness. You move forward, leaving the healing lodge behind. Ahead, the sky widens into a canvas of deepening blue. Stars will come soon, and with them a new kind of winter gathering shaped by light and ritual. You walk away from the healing lodge with the warmth of spruce tea still drifting through your chest, and the cold greets you again, crisp and glittering. The sky above has shifted into a clearer shade of blue, the kind that promises evening is approaching even while sunlight still lingers. You follow a gentle slope upward, where the scent of smoke fades and a new stillness spreads across the land. There is something waiting here, something quieter than trade, and deeper than medicine. A gathering shaped not by hunger or need, but by meaning. As you climb, the trees thin out, giving way to an open ridge. Snow stretches wide and undisturbed, reflecting the last gold of daylight. In the distance, you see a soft glow pulsing from a circle of torches planted into the snow. Their flames flicker gently, steadying themselves against the rising night. You draw closer and hear faint murmurs, soft and rhythmic, weaving through the cold air like threads of sound. It is not conversation, it is song. The circle ahead holds several figures cloaked in heavy winter garments. They stand in stillness, facing upward toward the first stars beginning to pierce the dimming sky. The moment feels suspended, balanced between day and night, between cold and warmth. between the human world and something larger. You instinctively slow your steps, sensing you are entering a space shaped by reverence. A detail grounded in numerous cultural accounts rises in your thoughts. Many indigenous nations across the northern regions held winter ceremonies guided by the stars, honoring ancestors, giving thanks for survival, or seeking guidance for the months ahead. Some rituals involved quiet songs carried from generation to generation. Others centered around stories believed to open pathways between earthly life and spiritual realms, especially during the longest nights when the sky felt close enough to touch. You step into the circle's edge as someone begins to beat a small drum, the rhythm slow and steady. The sound moves through you like a pulse rising from the earth itself. The drum's tone blends with the gentle crackle of torch flames. Snow reflects each beat, as if the entire ground is vibrating softly. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm anchor your breath. When you open them, the sky has deepened, revealing streaks of pale green shimmering faintly across the horizon. The northern lights, thin at first, shimmer like silk being shaken gently. They ripple and fold above you, casting a subtle glow across the faces in the circle. It feels unreal, a dream taking shape in the air. You sense why ceremonies often took place beneath the night sky. This light transforms everything. Someone begins a chant, low and melodic, carried on the cold air with a confidence that comes from deep memory. The words are soft, spoken in a language shaped by snow, wind, and history. You cannot understand them, yet you feel their intention. Warmth, respect, continuity. A reminder that life persists even when the world sleeps. You recall something that researchers have observed. Many winter ceremonies combined practical guidance with spiritual expression. Storytelling taught lessons for survival. Drumming steadied the mind during difficult seasons. Songs carried instructions disguised as rhythm and imagery. But whether these practices originated in shared traditions or developed independently across regions remains a topic scholars continue to explore. The complexity of cultural exchange is woven into every strain of song, every gesture, every firelit movement. One figure steps forward and sprinkles dried plant matter onto a small fire at the center of the circle. The flames flare briefly, releasing fragrant smoke that spirals upward toward the shimmering sky. The scent is warm and calming, a blend of cedar and sweetgrass. It curls around you, comforting and grounding. Smoke in ceremonies often served as a bridge, carrying prayers upward or cleansing the space. You inhale gently, feeling your shoulders loosen. You notice a child standing near the edge of the group, wrapped in a large fur cloak. Their eyes widen with awe as the lights strengthen across the sky. The aurora now unfolds in sweeping waves, greens deepening, hints of violet shimmering at the edges. The child watches the sky with complete stillness, as though staring into a living story. You imagine how many children through centuries saw this same sky, their small hearts filled with wonder, their elders whispering meaning into their ears. A soft chant rises again, this time joined by multiple voices. The harmony is simple but powerful. It flows easily, almost blending into the wind. You listen, feeling the sound tug gently at the edges of your thoughts. Ceremonies like this were not performances. They were conversations between people and the world around them. The snow, the sky, the ancestors, the unseen forces that shape both hardship and blessing. A small detail drifts into focus, one that many people seldom hear about. Some winter ceremonies included the practice of placing carved objects in the snow, letting them rest under starlight overnight. By morning, the objects were believed to absorb clarity or protection, depending on the intention of the ritual. You picture one such carving now, a small wooden figure resting beside the glowing fire, its surface catching the reflection of the dancing lights. Someone steps toward you and offers a thin strip of dried willow bark. You accept it with quiet curiosity. Chewing the bark releases a slightly bitter taste, followed by a soothing warmth that spreads through your throat. Willow was known to ease discomfort and reduce pain, and here it acts as both medicine and symbolic participation in the ceremony. You place it gently against your tongue, feeling its taste blend with the cold air. The song gradually fades into silence. The torches hiss softly as a breeze passes. The aurora continues its shimmering dance, now brighter, rolling across the sky like a slow-flowing river of light. Everyone in the circle stands still, watching in shared silence. You sense that this is the heart of the moment, not the singing, not the fire, the quiet. The collective breath held in reverence for a sky that has captivated generations. You tilt your head back and let the lights fill your vision. You feel the cold on your cheeks, the warmth of the ritual smoke in your hair, the vibration of distant drumbeats lingering in your chest. You understand why families gathered for ceremonies like this. Winter is long, harsh, and sometimes lonely, but gatherings create belonging. Rituals create meaning. Light creates hope. When the group begins to disperse, you remain for a moment longer. The snow around you glows faintly with the reflection of the sky. The torches flicker. Your breath forms thin clouds that drift upward, as if joining the lights themselves. Eventually, you step away from the circle and continue across the ridge. The path ahead leads toward families teaching their young how to endure winter, how to navigate the cold, not with fear, but with skill and confidence. The stars guide your way as you walk, their cold brilliance lighting the next chapter of this frozen world. You leave the ridge slowly, carrying the echo of drumbeats in your chest as the aurora fades behind you. The night deepens, but the snow reflects enough starlight that the path ahead glows faintly, guiding your steps with quiet assurance. As you walk, you hear something different from the solemn rhythm of ceremony. Soft laughter, light footsteps, a higher-pitched voice humming a familiar tune. You follow the sound until the trees part to reveal a small clearing where families gather to teach their young how to survive the frozen world. The space is calm, rimmed by tall spruces that block the strongest winds. A fire burns at the center, its light flickering across a ring of bundled children who sit with wide eyes, each clutching a small tool. Their elders kneel among them, patient and alert. Teaching in winter is not loud or hurried. It is woven into the slow rhythm of night, where every sound can be heard clearly and every lesson lingers in memory. You approach quietly, taking a place near the outer edge of the group. One elder holds a piece of hardened snow in their hand and presses it gently, showing a child how to test the crust before stepping. The child mimics the gesture, poking the snow and listening for the faint crackle that warns of weakness beneath the surface. You watch with interest, realizing that children learned from an early age how to read the land as naturally as they read a face. Snow had tones, ice had moods. Trees offered hints about wind direction. The winter world spoke constantly, and children were taught how to listen. A grounded insight from historical accounts rests lightly in your thoughts. Many northern indigenous communities began winter training early in childhood, ensuring that by the time young ones were strong enough to travel long distances, they already understood how to interpret tracks, build fires, identify safe ice, and navigate storms. These skills were not taught through lectures. They were taught through presence, imitation, and gentle correction. One elder hands a small bone knife to a boy, no older than 6. The child holds it carefully, aware of both its usefulness and its danger. With guided hands, he scrapes frost from a strip of bark, learning how to remove the outer layer without damaging the inner fiber. Bark strips were essential for weaving, binding, and repairing sled parts. Even a child's practice scrapings could help replace worn bindings. You watch as the boy works, his tongue peeking out in concentration. A little girl nearby kneels beside a snowdrift, carving a small hollow with her mittened fists. She presses her hand to the inner wall of the hollow to test its firmness. A woman nods approvingly. Snow shelters for emergencies were taught early. Even small hands could shape a mound strong enough to block wind. You imagine her one day building a full-sized snow shelter, tucking her own children inside while storms howl across the land. You move closer to the fire, as an elder places a handful of dried roots into a small pot. Children lean in to catch the smell as it warms. These roots, someone explains, can be chewed for energy during long travel. Teaching children the flavors of winter mattered. Roots tasted earthy. Berries tasted sharp. The sap of certain trees carried a faint bitterness. Every flavor was part of survival, and children learned to trust their tongues as much as their eyes. A small, charming historical detail drifts into your awareness. In some communities, children sometimes played a winter game where they mimicked tracking animals by crawling across the snow and leaving prints. Their elders would follow and identify the animal based on how the child moved. It taught tracking skills through laughter rather than pressure. You smile, as one child now does exactly that, hopping like a rabbit until he tumbles giggling into a soft drift. The others squeal with delight. Nearby, another child practices tying knots in sinew. Their fingers are clumsy, but the elder guiding them waits patiently, letting the child discover the correct tension. Knotwork held winter equipment together. A mistake could cost someone a snowshoe or a shelter wall. Patience was not only a virtue, it was necessary. As you watch these lessons unfold, a question surfaces, one that researchers still discuss. Were winter skills taught with formal structure, or did children absorb them simply by observing daily life? Accounts vary widely. Some recall designated lesson times, especially during long, dark evenings. Others emphasize that children learned naturally as they followed their families through chores and travel. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, shaped by climate, tradition, and each family's rhythm. The fire crackles softly. A young girl sits beside it, turning a small piece of wood in her hands. An elder kneels behind her, guiding her into carving a simple fish shape. The motion is slow and deliberate. The elder whispers something, and the girl smiles. Carving was not only practical, it strengthened coordination, focus, and pride. You imagine the girl someday shaping tools for her own family, the memory of these early lessons warming her even more than the fire before her. You notice one child standing slightly apart, looking upward at the sky. The stars reflect in his eyes. Winter nights often sparked curiosity. Children asked questions about constellations, spirits, and ancestors. Elders answered in stories that blended instruction with meaning. Survival required knowledge, yes, but also perspective. Children were taught that they were part of a larger world, connected to the land, the sky, and the people who came before. An older man calls the group closer. He holds a small pouch made of tanned hide. From it, he scatters a few tiny seeds into the fire. They snap softly, releasing a brief scent of wild mint. The children quiet instantly. This simple act reminds them to respect the land, to give thanks for lessons learned, to honor the balance that allows their families to endure winter after winter. Even small rituals mattered. The fire begins to burn lower. Children yawn behind their mittens. Parents tie hoods more tightly around sleepy faces. You watch as little ones are lifted onto sleds or wrapped in warm cloaks. Their lessons tonight will stay with them, quietly shaping their instincts for years to come. You feel the warmth of the fire fade as families begin to move toward their shelters. Snow crunches softly beneath boots. Voices drift in gentle whispers. The night deepens. You turn your head and catch sight of another gathering farther off, where older figures sit together wrapped in heavy furs, speaking softly. Their voices carry the cadence of stories preserved through time. You realize you are being drawn toward them next, for winter survival was not only taught through hands and action, it was also preserved through tales whispered in the long night. You leave the clearing where children learned their winter lessons, and the night folds around you once again. The stars have brightened, scattered across the sky like frost crystals caught in moonlight. The cold feels sharper now, but not unfriendly. It nudges you forward, pushing you toward the sound that drifts gently through the trees. A low hum, a soft voice, a rhythm that seems older than the snow beneath your feet. You follow the sound until the forest opens into a small hollow lit by a single fire. Figures sit in a wide circle, wrapped in thick furs, their silhouettes moving gently with the sway of their breaths. You immediately sense that this gathering is not meant for work or instruction, it is meant for memory. You lower yourself onto a patch of packed snow at the edge of the circle. The fire snaps softly, sending tiny sparks upward where they vanish before reaching the sky. The warmth brushes your face, and the shadows flicker across the lined faces of those seated closest to the flames. These are elders, the keepers of winter stories. Their eyes reflect the firelight with a steady glow that speaks of seasons survived, storms endured, and knowledge carried carefully through generations. One elder clears their throat, and the entire circle becomes still. Their voice begins as a whisper, barely touching the air. Then it grows, lifting gently, flowing like warm breath into the cold. The story unfolds with the ease of someone who has repeated it for decades. Their words paint images in your mind of a time when the land was young and animals spoke freely. The tale glides between humor and wisdom, revealing how the hare tricked the colder winds one winter and how the raven learned to store light in the darkest season. A detail grounded in traditional oral history practices rests quietly in your thoughts. Many indigenous communities relied on winter storytelling as the principal way to teach history, values, humor, and survival strategies. Some stories were practical guides disguised as adventure. Others offered moral lessons for children or reminders of ancestral resilience. Winter was the time to share them, for long nights welcomed long words. Another elder joins in, finishing the last line of the previous tale, as though catching a thread mid-air. Their tone is deeper, their pace slower. They speak of migrations led by star patterns, of a great hunt that lasted 7 days, of a child who once followed a strange track into the woods and found something unexpected waiting at the end. The children listening lean forward, wide-eyed. Even the adults seem to sink into a familiar comfort. A little to your right, someone stirs a pot that sits at the edge of the fire. The scent of herbs and broth floats through the circle, mingling with the smoky air. This pot, you imagine, has accompanied many such gatherings. Winter storytelling was always more than talk. It was shared warmth, shared food, shared time. You feel your stomach react gently to the smell. The aroma does not interrupt the stories. It enhances them, like a soft drumbeat beneath a song. A small unusual detail from the past drifts into your awareness. Some families kept special winter story masks or carved figures that were only brought out during the cold months. These were not objects of fear, but tools that helped narrators represent certain characters. Sometimes a storyteller lifted a small carving into the firelight to show the face of a trickster spirit. Other times, a mask was passed around so each listener could feel its carved edges. Such tactile moments made stories come alive in the dark. You imagine a figure like that resting now inside someone's pack, waiting for later in the evening. One of the elders pauses the story to sip from a wooden cup. They look up at the sky before continuing. The next tale begins not with animals or spirits, but with remembered history. They speak of ancestors traveling across snow so deep it swallowed their knees. They describe the way families built shelters in single nights when storms overtook them. They recount a winter when hunger pressed hard, but cooperation saved every life. The listeners nod slowly. These stories hold truth. Not dramatic heroics, but small acts of endurance that shaped survival. A question surfaces in your mind, one that researchers sometimes examine. Did winter stories follow a strict order, passed down with precision, or did each storyteller shape the tale to fit the moment? Accounts vary. Some communities maintained specific phrasing for sacred stories. Others allowed narrators to embellish or adjust details. Winter narratives were living things, shifting with the teller and the listeners. Tonight, you sense you are hearing a blend. The elders speak with confidence, yet their pauses and glances reveal adaptation in real time. They respond to the children's reactions, the fire's temper, the mood of the night. You watch a child beside the fire who clutches a small, round stone warmed in their mitten. The child rolls it between their palms while listening, perhaps imitating the way elders hold objects as they speak. You smile at the sight. Children absorb more than words during these gatherings. They absorb posture, tone, rhythm. They learn how to speak with presence, how to honor silence, how to share a story without rushing. Another elder begins a different tale. Their voice is raspy but warm. This story describes a wandering winter spirit who travels the land seeking kindness. When the spirit finds warmth, generosity, or shared food, it leaves a blessing in its wake. The elders' eyes sparkle as they tell it, and the children step a little closer, pulling their cloaks tighter around themselves. You feel a subtle warmth in your chest, a sense that the tale is teaching more than it seems. The fire pops loudly, sending a shower of sparks upward. One spark lands near your boot and melts instantly into a tiny dark spot. Someone chuckles quietly. Even the fire participates in winter storytelling, its crackles punctuating the tales like playful commentary. A pot of broth is passed around the circle. When it reaches you, you take a sip. The flavor is rich and earthy, with hints of herbs that grow near marshy summer grounds. The warmth of the broth spreads through your chest and settles in your belly. It deepens the comfort of the moment. Story, fire, food, and cold night blend into a single experience, a winter tapestry woven from simple but essential threads. The next story begins with a soft laugh. An elder recounts a mischievous winter fox who pretended to be lost so it could follow hunters and steal small scraps from their packs. The children giggle, and even you cannot help but grin. Humor mattered in winter. It lifted spirits during long nights and reminded families that even cold seasons held reasons to smile. A subtle thought arises. Story circles served many roles. They preserved history, strengthened bonds, entertained young ones, eased fear, and honored memory. But they also reminded families that even in the harshest winter, community remained strong. No one endured the cold alone. As the stories wind down, the fire dims. The elders speak softer now, their words drifting into the air like snowflakes. The final tale is brief. It speaks of gratitude, of acknowledging the land for its gifts, of thanking ancestors for guidance, of trusting the return of light, even on the coldest night. Silence follows, a deep, warm silence in which everyone breathes together. One by one, figures rise and head back toward their shelters. You linger for a few breaths longer, letting the warmth sink deeper. Eventually, you stand and turn toward a narrow path leading away from the hollow. Ahead lies a darker stretch of forest, a place where shadows move differently. You sense that the wilderness holds predators too, creatures whose presence shaped winter vigilance. You take a steady breath and walk toward that deeper darkness. You move away from the quiet circle of elders, stepping back into the deeper forest where the firelight no longer follows you. The trees gather close again, their trunks rising like tall guardians outlined faintly by starlight. The snow beneath your feet softens each sound you make, turning every step into a whisper. The silence here feels different. It has teeth. It has breath. It has a watchfulness that pricks lightly at the back of your neck. You stop. Listen. The forest holds still but not empty. Somewhere far off, branches shift with a faint crack that does not belong to wind. You know, winter stories often reminded families to respect the creatures who shared the frozen land. Some were shy, some were curious, and some patrolled their territory with confidence sharpened by hunger. Your eyes adjust slowly. The moon brushes the snow with a pale sheen that reveals faint lines crossing the ground. Tracks. You crouch and examine them. Large, round impressions spaced with steady stride. Each paw print presses deeply into the powder, the edges crisp and unmistakable. Wolf. The animal moved gracefully, without hesitation, its path curving between the trees like a line drawn with quiet precision. The sight does not frighten you, but it sharpens your senses. Wolves have lived alongside people here for countless winters, Families learn to read their trails the same way they read the weather. A detail grounded in historical understanding comes to mind. Many indigenous nations respected wolves not only as competitors for food but as teachers. Observing how wolves traveled across snow, how they circled prey, or how they navigated frozen lakes could reveal valuable survival knowledge. Their presence was not merely tolerated but often admired. You stand slowly, feeling that admiration stir through you as you glance deeper into the trees. The forest opens slightly to your left, revealing a small clearing where the moonlight gathers. You move toward it but pause again when you notice another set of tracks. These are different, wider spacing, claw marks longer, the stride heavier. A cougar, perhaps. You study the prints with a careful eye. The shape is elegant, but the depth shows power. A large cat passed through here recently, choosing a path that avoided the wolves' trail. The snow tells the story clearly, as if the creatures wrote it for you to read. A thought rises, the kind researchers often discuss. How frequently did winter families encounter predators at close range, and did they ever collaborate indirectly with them? Some accounts suggest that hunters sometimes took advantage of wolves' tracking skills, following their trails to find prey. Other accounts imply a cautious distance maintained at all times. The truth varies with region and season, shaped by respect more than fear. You walk further into the clearing, the cold air settling like a quiet weight on your shoulders. The silence thickens here. You hear nothing but your own breath, steady and visible in the frosty air. The moonlight reveals a fallen tree ahead, its trunk half buried under snow. As you step closer, you see faint grooves on the surface where sharp claws once scraped. Bears sometimes left such marks before entering hibernation, as if signing the land one last time before retreating into sleep. You place your hand near the grooves, feeling the cold bark, and imagine the size of the creature that made them. A small, lesser-known detail slips into your thoughts. In some communities, families used the presence of ravens or magpies to gauge predators nearby. These birds often followed wolves or cougars at a distance, waiting for scraps. When ravens circled too eagerly in winter, it sometimes meant a predator had brought down prey not far away. Even birds acted as guides for those who learned how to watch them. You straighten and listen again. The forest seems to inhale, then exhale in a long, quiet sigh. Your ears catch a faint rustle behind you, and you turn your head slowly. A dark shape moves at the edge of vision, slipping between shadows. It is not close enough to alarm, but close enough to remind you that you are a guest in someone else's territory. The shape moves with fluid precision, pausing only once before vanishing among the trees. You do not follow. Some presence is meant to be acknowledged, not approached. Snow drifts downward from a branch above. You tilt your head back to watch. The flakes catch the moonlight in a delicate silver shimmer before settling on your fur collar. Winter predators often move under such cover, using snowfall as camouflage. Families who lived here learned to listen for what snow concealed, not just what it revealed. A soft crunch where no human foot should fall. The rhythmic puff of warm breath in icy air. The quiet patter of paws circling a camp's perimeter. You keep walking, moving with slow, mindful steps. Ahead, the forest shifts again, opening to a stretch of frozen river. You approach its edge and kneel, inspecting the ice. Near the bank, deep claw marks score the surface. A fox, perhaps, tried to catch a fish beneath thin ice. Farther out, deeper impressions show where a wolf pack crossed earlier in the day. The river acts as a highway for both humans and animals in winter, but it demands respect. A single weak patch of ice can change a life instantly. A whisper of knowledge enters your thoughts. Some families place small sticks near river crossings to test ice thickness before stepping onto it. If the stick broke too easily or sank, the crossing was unsafe. You imagine doing the same now, tapping the surface gently. The ice here holds firm under your touch. You rise and continue along the riverbank. Behind you, a distant howl breaks the quiet. The sound lifts into the air with a haunting clarity that makes your spine shiver. Yet the shiver is not fear, it is recognition. Wolves call to each other through the cold, asserting presence, seeking their pack, marking territory. Their voices become part of the winter landscape, as essential as the wind or the creak of the trees. The howl lingers long after it fades. You take a slow breath and move forward. The snow crunches beneath your feet, grounding you in the present moment. Ahead, beyond the curve of the river, another challenge waits. Winter travelers must cross ice as surely as they walk through forest, learning when to trust the surface and when to wait. You sense that your path is leading you towards such a crossing now. You walk steadily, feeling the eyes of the wilderness on your back. Not hostile, simply aware. You remain respectful, grateful for safe passage, and ready to continue into the next stretch of winter's domain, where ice becomes the path beneath your feet. You follow the frozen river until it bends toward a narrow gorge where the trees lean in closer, their branches heavy with snow that glows faintly under the moon. The distant howl fades behind you, swallowed by the dark. Ahead, the river's surface gleams with a glassy sheen that warns you to slow your steps. You know instinctively that this is where families measured winter's risks with care, skill, and a patient understanding of ice. You kneel near the bank and brush aside the powdery snow covering the frozen water. The ice beneath sparkles with tiny fractures, like the delicate veins in a leaf. It looks beautiful, but beauty is not a guarantee of safety here. You place your palm lightly on the surface. The cold pulses up your arm with a sharp, clean bite. Ice always tells the truth to those who know how to listen. A quiet, grounded detail surfaces in your thoughts. Many northern indigenous communities learned to read ice by sound and vibration. A muted thud meant solid thickness. A hollow echo meant caution. A sharp, crackling stretch meant danger, even if the ice looked smooth. You shift your weight forward slightly and tap the surface with a stick lying nearby. The sound thumps back with a reassuring firmness. You rise and step slowly onto the river, testing with each footfall. The ice sighs beneath you, a long, low tone that vibrates gently through the soles of your boots. Not a warning, but a reminder that the frozen water beneath you is alive in its own way. Every winter crossing carried a sort of conversation between traveller and ice. A faint trail of old sled lines marks the center of the river, barely visible beneath the dusting of snow. Families once crossed here with bundles of supplies, trusting this frozen road to carry them to hunting grounds, trade routes, or warmer shelters. On clear nights like this, the moonlight guided them across the smooth expanse, turning the river into a silver pathway stretching far into the dark. As you continue, you notice a darker patch ahead. The ice looks thinner there, shaded by an overhanging ledge where sunlight rarely touched. You stop immediately. Thin ice often hides beneath deceptive layers of snow, waiting for the unwary. Families taught their children to recognize such zones on sight, shaded areas, places where the river narrowed, spots where underwater springs created warmer currents that ate away the ice from below. To your right, you see a safe crossing route where frost feathers spread across the ice in swirling patterns. You step carefully toward it, following the natural signs that travelers once relied upon. The cold tightens around your face, but your body feels steady, guided by this old knowledge. A small impression in the snow catches your eye. A boot print, perhaps a few hours old. Someone walked this same path recently. The print is deep at the heel, lighter at the toe, suggesting cautious forward testing. You kneel and study the shape. The snow has not drifted over it, meaning the walker passed during calm weather. You imagine them pausing here too, weighing the ice with the same careful patience you now use. A low crack echoes suddenly across the river, sharp and clean like the snap of a frozen twig. You freeze, your breath held lightly in your chest. The sound does not repeat. The ice settles. Cracks in winter rivers often shift when temperatures drop suddenly, creating tension lines that stretch across the surface. Travelers learn to respect these sounds without panicking. Ice speaks, but not always in warnings. You take another slow step and feel the surface strengthen beneath your feet. Once past the thin patch, the ice becomes clearer and more solid, revealing faint shapes beneath. Branches trapped in frozen currents, pebbles that gleam like dark stars at the bottom. You feel as if you are walking on sky again, but inverted, with the universe below your feet instead of above your head. A lesser-known detail weaves itself into your mind. Some families place small markers along frequent crossing sites. A bent branch stuck upright in the snow, a short line of stones at the river's edge. These markers change slightly from winter to winter, but always conveyed direction, caution, or safe passage. You notice something similar now. A piece of driftwood lodged upright in a snowbank near the opposite shore. You nod silently to whoever placed it. As you approach the far bank, the ice thickens so visibly that it grows opaque. You step confidently onto the packed snow of the riverbank and follow a narrow path upward toward a cluster of low hills. The trees thin once more, offering a view of the landscape rippling outward in white waves. You pause and look back. The river stretches behind you like a shining ribbon, calmly reflecting the stars. You can almost imagine families crossing in small lines, sleds scraping lightly over the ice, breaths forming clouds in the still winter air. Crossing frozen rivers required equal parts courage and respect. Both brought people safely from one world to the next. A question drifts through your thoughts. How did families decide when to trust the ice and when to wait? Accounts vary. Some waited for precise moon phases, others watched for temperature shifts. Still others relied on the wisdom of elders who had crossed the same river dozens of winters in a row. The mixture of knowledge and intuition formed a balance that shaped survival. You turn inland, leaving the frozen river behind. The land ahead bristles with rocky outcroppings and patches of wind-sculpted snow. Families moving through this rugged stretch relied on more than tools and clothing. They relied on creativity, improvisation, and the ingenuity to make do when resources ran thin. You pull your cloak tighter, breathe in the cold, and step forward into the terrain where innovation became the quiet hero of winter survival. You leave the frozen river behind and follow a rising path where the land begins to shift into a rougher, more uneven terrain. Snow gathers in thick pockets between jagged stones, and the wind sweeps across the ground in restless currents that tug gently at your clothing. Here, the wilderness feels raw. Survival in this place demands more than strength. It requires creativity sharpened by necessity. You sense that you are stepping into the part of winter where ingenuity becomes as essential as food or warmth. The first thing you notice is a small structure tucked against a rocky ledge. It is not a shelter in the usual sense. It looks more like a quick construction built from whatever the land offered. Fallen branches, packed snow, and slabs of bark wedged carefully to form a windbreak. You run your hand along one of the bark panels. It is rough and frozen but sturdy. Someone built this in a hurry, likely during travel, using only what they could gather in minutes. Such temporary shelters often meant the difference between discomfort and real danger during sudden storms. A grounded detail from traditional winter practices rises into your awareness. Many indigenous families created emergency shelters, shaped from snow blocks or branches layered with moss and frozen earth. They needed only a few tools and sharp instincts. A traveler caught in a blizzard could survive the night by carving a hollow into a deep drift, or constructing a quick lean-to that trapped their warmth. Even without full shelter, knowledge turned scarcity into protection. You step back and scan the area. A narrow trail winds upward through rocks where the snow has drifted in uneven piles. As you walk, you notice something curious. A shallow pit dug into the snow with a thin slab of stone resting over it. You kneel, lift the slab, and peer inside. Beneath it lies a small cache of dried roots and nuts kept slightly warmer by the protected ground. A simple trick, yet clever. Even in the coldest months, the earth beneath a few inches of snow retains a hint of heat. Families once used such natural insulation to keep food from freezing solid. A small, intriguing detail drifts through your thoughts. Some families stored glowing embers underground beneath layers of ash to preserve fire during long travel. These tiny pockets of heat could reignite quickly, saving precious time and effort when nights grew too dark or too harsh. You picture someone bending over such a hidden fire bed, coaxing it back to life with dry grass and steady breath. The wind rises as you climb higher. You pull your cloak tighter and look toward a cluster of low shrubs partly buried in snow. They appear brittle, but as you get closer, you notice thin strands of fiber tied neatly around their branches. Someone harvested plant fibers here recently and left behind a few strands. You pick one up and twirl it between your glove and thumb. Even in winter, families found ways to craft necessary tools: strong cord, weaving strips, fishing line. Fibers taken during warm months were often carried through the cold, but winter sometimes offered unexpected materials too, such as inner bark softened by frost. You walk onward and find the remains of an old fire pit. The charred wood is almost dust now, but a few larger pieces remain. You lift one. It is featherlight. Fire-hardened wood was sometimes repurposed as quick kindling or even carved into small tools, since the burning process toughened it while reducing moisture. You turn the wood in your hand, realizing its shape might have once been intentional. Perhaps someone carved it into a temporary handle or a fastening peg. Even a discarded ember told a story about resourcefulness. A puzzling shape in the snow ahead draws your attention. You approach it slowly and discover a crude sled made from branches tied with sinew strips. Its runners are straight but slightly warped, as though crafted quickly without access to perfect materials. You kneel beside it and run your hand along the frame. The sled is small, perhaps used for hauling firewood or carrying a single load. The sinew bindings have frozen stiff but remain intact. This little sled whispers a truth. Winter ingenuity was often born of urgency. You did not always wait for ideal materials. You built with what the cold allowed. A question surfaces, one that scholars still contemplate. How often did winter improvisation lead to long-term innovation? Did tools made in moments of scarcity later evolve into standard designs, or were they forgotten once better resources became available? The answers differ from region to region. Some emergency solutions became traditions. Others remained stories told during cold evenings when people remembered winters that tested their cleverness. Nearby, another sign of creativity reveals itself. A long stick stands upright in the snow, its top wrapped in hide scraps. You tilt your head, trying to understand. Then it clicks. A marker placed to locate a hidden storage pit beneath the snow. Without such markers, even experienced travelers could lose track of where supplies were buried, especially after fresh snowfall. The stick leans slightly, and you imagine a family returning during harsh weather, grateful to find this simple post guiding them to nourishment. You continue along the trail, your breath forming soft clouds that drift away in the faint breeze. The land levels out into a flat space bordered by low hills. Here you see the remains of another clever construction, a line of stones arranged to block drifting snow from burying a narrow path. Even small actions like this protected travelers from losing their way. Snow can erase trails in minutes. A slight barrier of rocks or branches could preserve the line long enough to be used again and again. A faint crunch startles you. You turn toward a nearby thicket and see a small animal dart away, its fur blending into the snow. You smile. Even animals adapt creatively to winter. And families paid close attention to the tricks of wildlife. How birds used snow for insulation. How foxes stored extra food. How beavers reinforced lodges with mud that froze into protective armor. Observing these habits inspired human solutions too, proof that winter learning came from every corner of the land. You reach a cluster of tall rocks and find something unexpected. A small wind flute carved from bone resting on a ledge. You lift it gently, surprised that it remains intact. Someone likely used this to signal across distances, or simply to bring a bit of softness into harsh days. Music was one of winter's quiet improvisations. When darkness lingered too long, even a brief melody could lift heavy spirits. You place the flute back and continue your walk. The snow becomes denser here, and the wind swirls it into low spirals across the ground. You pull your hood lower and press forward. Ahead, the landscape opens into a broad valley, where faint trails weave like threads across the snow. These trails hint at meetings between different families, at times when people came together not only for trade, but to share hardship and offer support. Winter ingenuity was not just in tools or shelters. It was also in the ways families collaborated, helping each other overcome scarcity, danger, and exhaustion. You step toward the valley, ready to witness how cooperation shaped survival when winter pressed hardest. You descend into the broad valley where the snow lies smooth and unbroken, as if waiting patiently for footsteps to give it purpose. The silence here feels different from the silence near predators or rivers. It does not hesitate or threaten. It simply stretches, open and expectant. You walk slowly, feeling the cold settle around you like a heavy cloak, and soon you notice faint lines crossing the valley floor. Paths made not by animals, but by people. The snow bears the subtle impressions of sled runners, boot marks, and packed-down trails where many feet once passed. You follow one of these trails, noticing how it curves gently toward a cluster of small shelters built close together. Smoke rises faintly from a central fire pit, and you sense that you have arrived at a meeting place of families from different parts of the region. The shelters vary slightly in shape. Some lean into willow frames covered in hides. Others resemble snow mounds reinforced with carved blocks. Together they form a small winter village, temporary yet steady enough to endure long nights and freezing winds. A grounded note from historical accounts comes quietly into your thoughts. Many indigenous nations formed winter alliances where neighboring families shared resources, exchanged news, or simply supported one another through the season's hardest weeks. These gatherings were not large or elaborate, but they were vital. A few extra hands meant safer travel. A shared meal meant fuller bellies. A combination of wisdom meant better preparation for the next storm. You approach the fire pit at the center of the camp. Several people sit around it, wrapped in thick fur robes with steam rising gently from their shoulders. The air smells of roasted meat mixed with the faint sweetness of heated sap. A pot hangs over the flames, and its bubbling sound feels like a welcome heartbeat in the cold. You settle onto a log, and someone offers you a strip of dried venison. You accept it with a quiet nod, appreciating its rich saltiness as it softens in the warmth of your mouth. Behind you, two elders speak in low voices. They discuss the condition of the ice roads, the movement of animals, and the signs of weather changing in the north. Their words carry both experience and caution, generations of winter knowledge distilled into gentle conversation. You realize how essential these exchanges were. A single warning about weak ice or a late-season storm could protect an entire group. Mutual aid formed the backbone of winter endurance. Nearby, a young woman shows another guest how she patched a tear in her winter robe, using sinew thread and a thin sheet of leather taken from an old pair of boots. The repair is simple yet strong. She explains that when materials ran scarce, families often traded small scraps or shared leftover materials to help each other stay warm. The guest offers her a small pouch filled with dried berries in return. The exchange is soft and humble, more about gratitude than trade. A small, charming detail rises into your thoughts. In some winter gatherings, families created shared play areas for children, using snowbanks to carve tunnels or building small snow shelters that allowed little ones to explore safely while adults worked or rested. You glance to your right and see exactly that. A cluster of children crawling through snow tunnels marked by spruce branches. Their laughter floats into the air, a warm contrast to the cold. Their play strengthens friendships long before the responsibilities of adulthood set in. You shift your gaze toward the far side of the camp, where a few hunters stand near their sleds. They lay out their tools to compare craftsmanship and share tricks learned in different regions. One shows how he reinforced his sled runners with frozen moss pressed tightly along the underside. Another demonstrates a new knotting technique that holds gear more securely during travel. These exchanges turn small ideas into powerful solutions, each traveler contributing a piece of winter wisdom. A question that researchers often discuss drifts into your thoughts. Were these winter alliances formal agreements maintained across generations, or did they form spontaneously based on necessity and opportunity? Accounts offer different perspectives. Some groups developed long-standing winter partnerships, returning to the same shared camp every year. Others formed flexible networks, helping whoever happened to be nearby during a difficult season. You suspect both patterns thrived at different times, shaped by climate, relationships, and the unpredictable character of winter. The fire crackles softly. Someone places a woven basket of roasted nuts near the flames to warm them. A few people gather around, offering bits of smoked fish, roots, or herbs to add to a communal stew. The aroma deepens, filling the air with a rich, comforting scent. Winter alliances were not only built on shared hardship, but also on shared meals. Food tasted better when eaten together, when laughter accompanied each bite, when stories softened the cold around the circle. A man seated across from you begins telling a tale about a winter long ago when two families trapped in separate storms eventually found one another by following the same drifting snow patterns. He gestures with his hands, describing how both groups had nearly lost hope until they heard distant voices through the wind. The tale blends humor and relief, ending with everyone gathered around one fire, grateful for simple survival. The listeners chuckle softly, their breaths rising as faint clouds in the air. You rise and stretch your legs, stepping away to explore the edge of the camp. There, you find a young couple mending a sled runner together. Their movements are synchronized, one scraping away ice, the other smoothing the wood with warm hands. They share a quiet conversation, planning the route they will take when the weather clears. Relationships strengthen during winters like this, where cooperation wasn't optional, but essential. You continue walking, observing a pair of elders teaching a visitor how to identify wind-sculpted snow formations that indicate hidden hollows or dangerous overhangs. Their voices are calm and instructional. Each point is emphasized through gesture rather than force. The visitor listens attentively, nodding with appreciation as they absorb knowledge that might one day save their life. As you wander through the camp, you feel the weight of winter ease slightly. This place radiates a sense of shared strength. Even the cold feels less sharp here. Cooperation is its own form of warmth. You eventually return to the trail leading out of the camp. The torches flicker behind you, and laughter continues to drift in the air. Ahead, shadows grow deeper and the wind picks up again. But now you understand something fundamental. Winter did not break families who walked these lands. It bound them together. You turn toward the darker path where hints of tension and vigilance await. For winter not only encouraged cooperation, it demanded watchfulness. Conflicts sometimes rose when resources ran thin, and families had to guard their shelters with care. Your next steps carry you toward those nights of alertness and strategy, when survival required more than warmth or ingenuity. You leave the warmth of the shared camp behind, stepping once again into the deeper forest where shadows stretch long, and the cold presses inward like a slow tightening hand. The wind sighs through the trees, carrying with it an edge that feels slightly different from the calm breezes you have known so far. This stretch of winter invites not only cooperation but vigilance. Families who survived here understood that the frozen world held beauty and abundance, but also moments of uncertainty when danger could drift silently across the snow. You walk carefully, your boots making soft impressions on the crusted layer beneath you. The forest grows denser, the trees standing closer together as if forming a protective wall. Yet the atmosphere feels heavier than before. You pause and listen. The wind continues its restless whispering, but beneath it lies a stillness that hints at hidden movement. Winter was a season of scarcity, and scarcity sometimes stirred conflict, whether between humans or between the animals that shared the land. A grounded point from historical accounts enters your thoughts. Many indigenous families practiced forms of winter watchfulness, staying alert for signs of unfamiliar travelers or rival hunting parties who might wander too close. These periods of tension varied from region to region. Some winters passed peacefully, while others carried the weight of old disputes or the pressure of limited resources. Families learned to read the land not just for prey, but for the presence of others. You notice a slight disturbance in the snow ahead. Boot prints, but not fresh, perhaps made early this morning. They lead toward a narrow ravine bordered by large boulders. You step closer and study the pattern. The footprints are spaced far apart, suggesting hurried movement. You scoop a handful of loose snow and let it fall slowly. A faint breeze carries it toward the ravine. Whoever passed this way likely followed the wind to mask their scent or sound. You feel a ripple of caution slide through your chest. As you move forward, you find a small bundle of twigs arranged beside a tree. Not random, deliberately placed. A sign. In some communities, such markers served as signals for companions traveling behind. They could mean danger, direction, or caution depending on their shape. These twigs form a small triangle. A warning, perhaps, left by someone who chose not to linger. A lesser-known detail rises in your mind. Some families placed snow mounds near their shelters, in patterns that acted as silent signals. A single dome shape meant the camp was peaceful. Two smaller mounds placed close together indicated heightened caution. These subtle cues allowed members arriving at night to understand the situation without making noise. You glance around, scanning the ground for similar shapes. The forest narrows further as you approach the ravine. The walls rise steeply on either side, coated with thick frost that sparkles like powdered glass. You take a careful step and hear a faint, distant crack. Not the sound of ice settling. Something else. You hold your breath, waiting. After a moment, the crack repeats. It sounds like a branch snapped under deliberate pressure. You shift your weight slowly, minimizing sound. The cold presses harder against your ears, sharpening every tiny noise. A few steps more reveal old hearth marks stained into the snow, the remains of a small fire that burned earlier in the day. The ashes are still black, crisp around the edges. Someone had camped here briefly. There are no belongings left behind, no food scraps, no tracks leading into the ravine, only tracks leading out. You kneel and touch the ashes, cold. Whoever was here left quickly, perhaps startled or cautious. A question that researchers often discuss slips into your awareness. When families traveled in winter, did they generally avoid contact with strangers, or did they welcome new faces seeking shelter? The answer is complex. Some groups shared food willingly, others remained wary, especially during lean seasons when resources dwindled. Winter brought out both generosity and protectiveness, depending on circumstance. You rise and continue onward, your senses now fully awake. The ravine deepens into a corridor of ice and rock. Your breath fogs the air in steady clouds. Then you notice something near a boulder, a woven feather charm tied to a low branch. It sways gently in the cold breeze. This is not accidental. Such charms were sometimes used to alert travelers to nearby camps, or to warn off those who should not come closer. You step around it respectfully, understanding that you are being allowed to pass, but not invited to linger. Your feet crunch softly as you reach the end of the ravine. Beyond it lies a wide-open expanse, a frozen field where moonlight spills across the snow like a shimmering lake. In the far distance, faint lights flicker, small fires clustered together. Perhaps another camp, perhaps hunters on the move. You cannot tell from here. You take a steady breath and listen again. The forest behind you groans as wind pushes against the trees. Ahead, the open field waits with quiet emptiness. Winter's watchfulness is not always about threats. Sometimes it is simply about being aware of crossings, boundaries, and the silent agreements that allowed families to coexist. You make your way along the edge of the field, choosing not to approach the distant fires. Respect shapes your steps. Every winter traveler understood the unspoken rule: move quietly, observe carefully, and never disturb a camp unless invited. You feel that rule settling in your chest like a steady drumbeat guiding your stride. Farther along, you find a small rise where someone left a carved wooden marker stuck upright in the snow. The carving is simple but precise. It resembles a bird in flight. You examine it closely. In some places, such markers indicated shared territory, where families were welcome to gather firewood or rest. The carved bird suggests freedom of passage. You smile slightly, relieved. A deeper quiet settles as you continue moving. The moon climbs higher, casting longer shadows across the snow. Your mind returns to the stories elders told earlier. Stories of nights when travelers kept watch in shifts, listening for unusual sounds, trusting their instincts to guide them through uncertainty. Winter watchfulness was never about fear alone. It was about readiness, awareness, connection. You feel that now, as each step carries you deeper into the vast unbroken snowland. Ahead, the terrain changes again. Hills rise on the horizon, their slopes illuminated by soft moonlight. Beyond those hills lies the world of winter mapping, where families read stars, wind, and snowdrifts with the skill of seasoned guides. You inhale the cold air, tighten your cloak, and walk toward the hills, ready to enter the silent art of navigating the snowbound world. You make your way toward the rising hills, leaving the field of silent watchfulness behind. The cold deepens, settling into the hollows of the land like a slow-moving tide. Yet there is clarity in this stretch of winter, a purity in the air that sharpens your senses and opens your mind to the vastness ahead. As you climb the first gentle slope, the land unfurls before you in long sheets of white stretching toward the dark horizon. It feels endless, but not empty. Hidden in this sweeping expanse are signs waiting to be read, if you know where to look. You pause at the crest of the hill. The moon sits high, full and clear, casting pale light across the snow. You breathe in deeply. The air tastes faintly metallic, the kind of cold that clings to your lungs and lingers on your tongue. Below you lies a network of subtle rises, ridges, and hollows sculpted by winter winds. At first glance, they appear random, but you know better. This is the world's oldest map. A grounded observation from traditional practices settles gently in your thoughts. Many indigenous families navigated winter landscapes by reading snow formations shaped by prevailing winds. Drift patterns revealed safe routes, concealed hollows, and the presence of frozen lakes. Snow ripples aligned with wind direction, helping travelers maintain orientation even when clouds hid the sun or storms swallowed the horizon. You step forward, your boots crunching softly as you descend the slope. The snow here spreads in long, even waves where the wind blows consistently from the northwest. You reach down and scoop a handful. It falls from your glove in light, airy crystals. This kind of snow forms on open plains, not sheltered forests. It tells you the landscape ahead is wide and unobstructed. You walk along a ridge and notice another formation, a narrow band of hard-packed snow that feels like pressed stone beneath your boots. This is a sign of repeated wind scouring, often found along natural corridors created between hills. Such corridors served as winter highways, allowing families to travel long distances without sinking into deep drifts. You follow the hardened path with quiet appreciation for the knowledge embedded in each subtle shift of snow texture. A faint glint catches your eye. You kneel and brush away powder to reveal a line of small stones barely visible beneath the surface. They form a subtle curve stretching toward the next hill. These are not accidental. Someone placed them long ago, marking a direction remembered through many winters. Such markers could guide travelers during heavy snowfall, when the landscape blurred into white sameness. You rise slowly, understanding that you are walking along a route shaped by generations who trusted the land and learned how to read its quiet language. A gentle, lesser-known detail drifts into your mind. Some families followed the patterns of wind-carved snow cornices to identify shelter locations. A deep inward curl indicated a protected area where camps could be built safely. A sharp outward crest warned of unstable drifts that might collapse under weight. You scan the horizon, and see a small inward curl near the base of a thick stand of trees. Even without going closer, you know it marks a place where someone once wintered. You continue forward, climbing another gentle hill. From its peak, the sky feels impossibly wide. Stars shimmer in clusters that glow like icy embers. The northern lights begin to stir again, faint ripples of pale green that barely brush the sky. You tilt your head back, absorbing the beauty. For countless generations, these lights guided travelers at night, their position and motion acting as celestial signals. Even when clouds covered them, the stars alone offered direction. Orion rising in the southeast, the North Star fixed in its eternal place, the Big Dipper pointing reliably to steady north. You lower your gaze and notice a faint line in the snow marked by tiny flecks of bark. You crouch and inspect them. They form a continuous trail, scattered lightly as though shaken from someone's pack. Bark trails like this sometimes marked routes between winter camps, especially when new snow threatened to erase footprints. The bark stands out against the white, subtle yet effective. You smile softly, appreciating the cleverness of such a simple method. Farther ahead, a small cluster of birch trees leans together on a slope. Their trunks curve in the same direction, shaped by many years of constant wind. Travelers used these natural markers as well. Trees bent consistently toward the south indicated strong northern winds. Trees with smoother bark on one side revealed where storms struck most often. You run your hand along one of the trunks. The smooth side faces east, a reminder that storms here favored one direction, helping travelers orient themselves even in poor visibility. A question often considered by researchers drifts into your mind. How much of winter navigation relied on formal teaching, and how much was intuitive, born of living closely with land and season? Some accounts highlight structured mentorship, while others emphasize quiet observation from childhood. Walking here, you sense the answer lies somewhere in between. Knowledge was passed through both spoken instruction and simply being present. Winter taught anyone who walked it with open eyes. You descend the hill and approach a long stretch of flatland where snow has gathered in gentle mounds. Each mound slopes slightly in the same direction, shaped by a wind that always blows from the west. You follow these subtle curves like reading a series of arrows pointing the way. The cold deepens as you step into this open area, but the clarity of the land fills you with calm rather than worry. You continue walking until you reach a frozen marsh. Its surface is hidden beneath a blanket of soft snow, but you can tell where the marsh begins by the clusters of cattail stalks rising like thin spears. The ground beneath might not be stable. You test it with your weight and feel a faint give. Travelers avoided marsh crossings unless necessary, relying instead on the sturdier land around its edges. You circle it patiently, following higher ground where small animal tracks dance lightly across the surface. On the far side, you see something remarkable. A pattern pressed into the snow where someone dragged a long branch behind them to create a guided trail. This technique helped entire groups follow a path in low visibility, especially during heavy snowfall. You imagine a leader walking ahead, dragging the branch steadily behind them, carving a line that others could follow safely even when the world turned into a swirling white maze. As you walk along the marked line, the wind grows stronger and snow begins to drift sideways. Visibility narrows, shadows blur, yet you feel no fear. Every sign around you serves as a guide. Wind direction, snow texture, tree lean, star position, the trail line beneath your boots. You take a slow breath, tasting the frost in the air. The storm brewing is mild for now, but you sense more snow coming. Travelers would prepare for such weather, seeking shelter or adjusting routes. Ahead, the land dips into another gentle valley, where scattered trees form a protective cradle. That is where families once watched animals move through winter, learning lessons in balance and endurance. You follow the path into that valley, ready to see what the creatures of snow and silence can teach you next. You descend into the shallow valley, where the wind softens and the snow settles into calmer shapes. It is quieter here, the kind of quiet that feels layered rather than empty. You pause at the base of a low ridge and listen. A soft rustle, a faint crunch, the delicate flutter of something small, shifting under a bush. You exhale slowly, realizing you have entered a place where winter animals move with their own careful rhythm. This valley is a classroom without walls, and every creature that walks, hops, or burrows here carries a lesson in survival. You take a few steps forward and notice tiny tracks darting across the snow in quick, uneven patterns. Snowshoe hare. Their paws are broad, built perfectly for staying atop the surface of deep drifts. You follow the prints, admiring how they angle sharply to the right near a cluster of spruce saplings. The snow there is disturbed in a soft burst, as though the hare leapt twice before disappearing into the shadows. You kneel and study the pattern. Hares often zigzag when they sense a predator nearby. Their erratic path is a message written in the snow, teaching anyone who watches how instinct and adaptation weave together. A grounded detail from traditional knowledge settles into your thoughts. Many indigenous hunters observed hares not only to find food but to understand weather patterns. Hares tended to stay near dense shrubs before storms, instinctively seeking windbreaks. If you saw them moving low and cautious, you knew rough weather was coming. You scan the valley now, noticing only a few tracks near heavy cover. The lesson is clear enough. Another snowfall is likely on its way. You rise and continue walking. Ahead, a fox trots across the snow with effortless grace, its tail held high like a plume. Its steps are precise, each paw placed in the print made by the one before it, creating a single line of neat impressions. You follow its trail for several paces. The fox weaves between fallen logs and past clumps of frozen grass. Then, without warning, it stops and leaps into the air, plunging headfirst into the snow. You watch in quiet amazement as it emerges with a small rodent clamped in its jaws. Foxes use their keen hearing to locate prey beneath the surface, listening for the faint scratching of tiny claws buried under snow layers. Their hunt teaches patience and acute awareness, skills winter travelers value deeply. A small, lesser-known detail drifts into your mind. Some families believe that watching foxes hunt helped sharpen a person's senses. Children sometimes followed fox trails quietly to learn how to anticipate movement through subtle cues. The stiffening of ears, the shift of wind, the way a fox tilts its head just before it dives. Those who learned from animals often became skilled hunters themselves. The fox trots away with its prize, leaving you alone again in the hush of the valley. You continue onward, noticing how the landscape narrows into a sheltered corridor lined with tall trees. The snow here is deep and undisturbed, except for a long set of heavy tracks that move in a straight, deliberate line. You approach them cautiously. The prints are broad, the toes spaced widely. A moose. Its weight has carved deep holes in the crust, each one filled with powder. Moose were winter masters, towering and slow but astonishingly strong. They navigated through drifts that would swallow a human waist-deep, breaking paths that smaller animals and people often followed later. You place your boot beside one print. Your footprint looks tiny in comparison. Families who traveled near moose learned to read the difference between calm pathways and those made by startled movement. Deep, consistent steps meant the animal moved without threat. Erratic holes fanning outward signaled disturbance or danger in the area. You follow the steady trail for a few yards before turning away, giving imagined space to the gentle giant who walked here earlier. Farther ahead, you reach a small rise overlooking a frozen pond. The snow across its surface is crisscrossed with delicate prints that look almost like embroidery. Tiny bird tracks scatter in every direction. You crouch and trace one with your fingertip. These belong to ptarmigan, whose feathers turn pure white in winter. A detail from traditional knowledge flutters into your awareness. Ptarmigan changed elevation with the seasons, offering clues about upcoming weather. When they gathered in lower valleys, snowstorms often followed soon after. You look around and notice a small cluster of white birds perched on a fallen log, their bodies blending perfectly into the snow. quiet harbingers of the shifting sky. A sudden rustle behind you makes you turn. A dark shape moves swiftly along the edge of the trees. You hold your breath for a moment until it steps into the moonlight. A lone wolf, poised and silent, its gaze fixed on the valley floor. It does not acknowledge you, but you can feel its presence like a cool blade of tension. Wolves were teachers too, though not through gentleness. They taught travelers to recognize boundaries, to honor space, and to move with respect. The wolf watches the ptarmigan a moment, then turns and disappears into the trees with quiet purpose. Another thought surfaces, one that scholars often revisit. How much of winter knowledge was shaped directly by observing animals, and how much came from long practice and inherited wisdom? The answer is woven tightly. Families watched animals year after year, learning not just behaviors but deeper truths about survival. Conserve energy, choose shelter wisely, adapt quickly, and never ignore the subtle cues that winter hides within its silence. You continue walking along the pond's edge. In the snow, you find evidence of another creature, a long, smooth tunnel carved beneath the surface where an otter slid repeatedly. You smile at the sight of it. Even in winter, some animals found joy. Otters taught families another lesson. Survival does not have to crush the spirit. Play and laughter had a place, even in deep cold. Children who saw otters slide on their bellies often imitated them, filling winter days with delight rather than dread. You climb a small incline overlooking the far end of the valley. From this vantage point, you see the snow dotted with signs of life. Trails twisted in layered loops, feeding sites, shelter depressions, marks left by paws, hooves, talons, and tiny claws. This valley is not empty. It is a thriving library of winter living. You stand for a moment, breathing in the cold, letting the lessons settle in your mind. Winter animals teach more than survival tactics. They teach humility, cooperation, adaptation, awareness, and above all, a quiet acceptance that you must move with the land, not against it. As you turn away from the valley, the sky above shifts again. The faint glow of morning lingers just beyond the distant hills. Light is returning, and with it comes the age-old practice of migration toward warmer paths, where families moved in search of renewal and changing seasons. You step forward, ready to follow the trail that leads toward the slow promise of thaw. You leave the valley of animal teachers behind, stepping toward the faint glow forming along the horizon. The stars begin to soften, fading into a pale shimmer as the first hint of dawn stretches across the sky. It is not full daylight yet, but winter mornings rarely arrive with dramatic flair. Instead, they seep slowly into the world, bringing a quiet silver light that touches the snow, like a gentle reminder that seasons shift, even when the cold feels endless. You walk across a broad plain where the snow lies smoother than before, less shaped by wind and more by the steady calm that often precedes seasonal change. The air feels different, still sharp, still cold, but with an undertone of softness that suggests the deep freeze is loosening its grip. You exhale and watch your breath curl upward. The mist hangs in the air for a moment longer than usual before fading, a subtle sign, but one that winter travelers understood well. A grounded truth from indigenous seasonal knowledge settles in your thoughts. Many communities timed their winter migrations carefully, sensing not only temperature changes but shifts in daylight, wind direction, and animal behavior. These cues signaled when it was time to prepare for movement towards spring camps, tapping into rhythms older than memory. Families moved not in haste but with deliberate grace, following patterns shaped by generations before them. As you continue walking, you notice a line of small willow stakes rising from the snow. They stand in a neat row, marking a route families traveled each year when the season began to change. These stakes guide you now, their tips frosted white but still visible enough to read. You follow them toward a gently rising slope, feeling the steady pull of a path well worn by countless feet. A soft crunch in the snow draws your attention. Ahead, you see a pair of caribou moving slowly across the plain, their bodies sleek beneath thick winter coats. They walk with purpose, heading southward. Caribou migrations offered reliable cues. When the herds shifted, families often shifted too, knowing that warmer weather and new opportunities followed these powerful animals. You watch the pair for a moment, admiring their calm stride, before continuing along the path they have just crossed. A delicate detail rises in your awareness. Some families believed that the first visible thaw at the base of certain trees marked the start of migration season. When the bark darkened with a tiny sheen of melting snow, or when sap scent drifted faintly into the air, people prepared their sleds and bundles. You step toward a large pine and place your palm against its trunk. It is still cold, but the bark feels slightly softened by the warming air, a small promise of change. The trail leads you toward a shallow ravine carved gently into the landscape. Snow along its sides has begun to settle, forming smoother lines rather than sharp ridges. As you descend, the sound of trickling water whispers beneath the ice. Almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Water moves when winter loosens. It is one of the earliest signs that the season is preparing to shift into something new. At the bottom of the ravine, you find a cluster of families assembling their belongings. Sleds rest on packed snow. Furs are rolled tightly and tied with sinew. Children carry bundles of dried roots and stored berries. Some adults check the condition of their snowshoes. Others adjust straps on their sled dogs' harnesses. The air carries a sense of purpose that feels both focused and hopeful. You join the edge of the gathering, watching as one elder lifts their face to the sky. They close their eyes briefly, as if listening to something carried on the wind. Then they nod, satisfied. Migrations were never dictated by a calendar. They were read through signs, sensations, and shared instinct. A question often considered by researchers enters your thoughts. Did families follow fixed routes each year, or did migrations shift based on conditions? It seems both occurred. Some regions offered reliable pathways that changed little across generations. Others required flexible routes shaped by snowfall, ice conditions, and animal movement. Winter taught resilience, but spring shaped adaptation. Nearby, a young woman secures a bundle filled with woven baskets, tools, and cured hides. She pauses to check the bindings twice, then smiles as a child helps tighten a loose cord. Cooperation remains at the heart of movement. During migrations, families travel together in loose but steady lines, supporting one another through ice crossings, steep terrain, and unexpected challenges. You follow the group as they begin their slow progression out of the ravine. The sky brightens, casting a soft blue glow across the snow. The sound of sled runners gliding across hardened frost mixes with the gentle murmur of conversation. Dogs trot with eager steps, tails swaying like small banners of enthusiasm. A playful detail surfaces. Children often competed to spot the first true sign of spring during migration, whether a patch of earth showing through snow or the distant call of a returning bird. When the first sign appeared, they announced it proudly, and the group offered small cheers or light laughter to encourage the moment. You scan the ground as you walk, half hoping to spot such a sign yourself. The trail leads you through a narrow pass between two rocky outcrops. A gust of warmer air brushes your cheek. It surprises you, almost enough to make you stop. Warmth in winter tastes unfamiliar. You smile at the sensation, imagining how families felt when they first sensed it after months of bitter cold. As you move beyond the pass, the land opens again into a wide terrace where the snow appears thinner. Here, parents show young ones how to prepare for the next camp. They demonstrate how to test ground stability, how to choose sheltered areas, and how to distribute weight evenly on sleds to prevent tipping. The lessons blend into movement, becoming part of the journey itself. You continue beside them, feeling the ground beneath you shift from deep drifts to firmer layers. The sound of dogs barking lightly echoes in the distance. A few birds flutter overhead, their wings slicing the air with crisp strokes. More signs, more cues. The path begins a gentle ascent toward another ridge, and as you climb, the horizon glows with a warmer shade. It is not yet spring, but the promise of it floats in the cold. Families adjust their gait, sleds slide more easily, spirits lift. At the top of the ridge you pause. Below lies a sprawling expanse where new routes will open as snow thins and light strengthens. This is where winter shifts from deep endurance to quiet preparation. Beyond this ridge lies the world of creativity, where families settle briefly and transform winter stillness into a workshop of tools, art, and resourceful invention. With the wind brushing softly against your cheek, you step forward into the next stage of winter's long journey. You step down from the ridge and enter a quieter landscape where the snow lies in broad, gentle swells that catch the morning light like brushed silk. The wind softens further here, flowing around you instead of pressing against you, as if the land itself is offering a moment of calm. In this stillness, you sense a different rhythm beginning to emerge. The urgency of migration fades slightly, replaced by the quiet pulse of creation. Winter travel is not only about moving through the cold, it is also about shaping, repairing, and crafting the tools that carry families safely from one season to the next. You walk toward a cluster of low shelters arranged around a shallow depression in the snow. Smoke rises from a few small hearths, drifting upward in thin spirals before dissolving into the pale sky. The air is filled with a subtle blend of scents: smouldering wood, warmed hide, and the faint sharpness of scraped bone. These smells guide you toward the heart of winter craftsmanship. You approach the nearest shelter and see two figures seated on a wooden plank placed across the snow. Between them lies a pile of raw materials: antler sections, small logs, stone flakes, and bundles of sinew. Their hands move with slow, practiced ease as they shape these materials into tools. One carves a smooth curve into a piece of wood, shaving away thin curls that fall onto the snow like tiny, curled petals. The other wets a length of sinew with careful patience, preparing it for binding. A grounded observation from traditional practice settles gently into your thoughts. Winter was often the ideal time for tool-making. The cold preserved hides and fibers, making them easier to store. The long nights provided hours for quiet, concentrated work, and the stillness of the season encouraged focus. Many of the tools used during the rest of the year were shaped during these months of frozen calm. You kneel beside the workers, watching closely. The carving continues with steady rhythm. Each movement is deliberate, shaped by both experience and instinct. The wooden piece gradually takes the form of a bow stave. Its curve follows the natural grain, guided by the maker's eye. You notice small marks along the wood, where the artisan has tested its flexibility. Winter bows were often crafted with particular attention to the cold, since freezing temperatures could crack less skillfully made pieces. You imagine the satisfaction of holding a finished bow, knowing it was shaped with patience and deep respect for the material. Beside the carver, another worker threads sinew through a small bone handle. Their fingers move briskly despite the cold. They tighten the binding, then smooth it with a small stone that fits perfectly in their palm. This tool might become a scraper, or a handle for a blade, or something else entirely. You feel a sense of wonder at how many different purposes a single piece of bone or wood can serve when guided by creative hands. A lesser-known detail rises into your thoughts. In some regions, families used winter darkness to polish tools with fine sand or snow, creating a smooth finish that not only improved performance but also carried meaning. A well-polished blade was a symbol of care. A polished handle showed pride in one's craft. In the dim winter light, polishing became a meditative act. You rise and move toward another shelter where a few children sit beside an elder. The elder holds a length of rawhide and stretches it slowly between their hands. The children watch with serious expressions, mimicking the motions as they practice softening smaller strips. Rawhide stiffens easily in winter, so it must be worked gently to remain usable. The elder explains each movement with quiet patience. You see how winter becomes a school for fine motor skills. as important as the lessons learned earlier in the clearing. Nearby, a pair of adults work on a sled runner. The wood lies across two supports, and one of them scrapes its surface with a sharp stone blade. The other heats a small pot over a fire, melting animal fat until it turns into a glossy liquid. They dip a smooth cloth into the warmed fat and apply it to the runner with steady strokes. This layer will protect the wood and help the sled glide more easily across snow. You imagine the difference a well-treated runner can make on long journeys, saving both energy and time. A quiet question surfaces in your thoughts, one that researchers have sometimes pondered. How much of winter craftsmanship was planned well in advance, and how much emerged spontaneously as needs arose? Some tools were crafted yearly in predictable cycles. Others were created only when unexpected challenges appeared. The winter workshop existed in a space between routine and improvisation, shaped by the season's demands. You wander toward another fire where someone is shaping a fishing spear. They carve barbs into the head of the spear, checking each angle carefully. Winter fishing through ice required precision. A spear too smooth might slip out of a fish's grasp. A spear too jagged might snag on the ice. The craftsperson uses a slender bone awl to refine the edges, tapping it lightly with a small wooden mallet. The sound is soft, rhythmic, almost soothing in its constancy. A few steps away, someone else prepares hafts for stone tools. They heat the ends of wooden sticks over the fire to soften them before inserting shaped blades. The warmth allows the wood fibers to bend without cracking. Once cooled, the hafts will grip the stone tightly. You watch sparks rise from the fire and drift upward, tiny glimmers that vanish before reaching the sky. Winter toolmaking creates moments of quiet beauty, even in simple tasks. You notice another figure working behind a shelter wall, their face partly hidden by a fur hood. They are carving patterns into a piece of antler. The lines flow in gentle arcs, forming shapes reminiscent of flowing water or wind. These designs do not alter the tool's function, but they imbue it with spirit. Artistic expression thrived even in winter, woven into everyday objects. A tool could be both practical and beautiful, carrying stories within its form. Farther along the camp, a young person tests the tension of a newly strung bow. They draw it carefully, feeling the resistance. An elder stands beside them, observing with a critical eye. When the younger one releases the string, it snaps with a sharp twang that echoes across the snow. The elder nods with approval. You sense the pride in that moment, the passing of skill from one generation to the next. Behind them, a group gathers around a stone slab used as a makeshift workbench. They sort through stones of various shapes, choosing those that flake well in the cold. Winter stoneworking required exceptional precision, as the cold made materials brittle. A single misjudged strike could ruin hours of shaping. You watch as someone taps a stone with controlled force, splitting it into clean flakes that will become blades, arrowheads, or scrapers. A soft clatter catches your ear. You turn to see a woman testing a newly carved snow shovel. She digs into a small drift, lifting and tossing snow aside. The shovel handles the burden well. She smiles, satisfied, and sets it beside a stack of tools ready for later use. Functional creation blends effortlessly with daily tasks. As you walk through the camp, you notice the growing brightness of the sky. The sun still hides below the horizon, but its light touches the snow with a faint blush. The craftsmen do not pause. Winter work continues steadily regardless of the hour. The cold encourages focus, each task completed with deliberate care. Finally, you step to the outskirts of the camp and look back. The scene feels warm despite the cold air. Fires glow softly. Hands shape bone, wood, and hide. Voices murmur with instruction and encouragement. Winter has become a workshop, shaping tools that ensure life continues smoothly across the seasons. You turn toward another trail leading into a wide clearing. The air there carries the promise of food, conversation, and shared warmth. Families gather for meals that nourish body and spirit, strengthening the bonds that help them endure winter's long embrace. With steady steps, you follow the scent of cooking and the murmur of voices into the next chapter of the frozen world. You follow the faint scent of cooking that drifts through the cold air like a warm thread guiding you forward. The snow brightens under the rising light, and the sky takes on a soft, pale gold that reflects gently across the landscape. As you approach the clearing, you hear the quiet murmur of voices and the low clatter of wooden bowls. The sound feels welcoming, like a gentle invitation to step into warmth after miles of silence. The clearing opens before you to reveal a small cluster of families gathered around several fires. The flames dance in slow patterns, their glow reflected in the eyes of those seated nearby. Even in winter, when food is precious and movement cautious, moments like this bring people together to share what they have. You approach the nearest fire and feel its heat touch your face, easing the tension from your cheeks. A pot sits suspended over the flames, its contents bubbling steadily, filling the air with a savory, comforting aroma. A grounded insight from traditional seasonal practices slips into your thoughts. Winter meals served more than nourishment. They offered strength, warmth, social connection, and an opportunity to reaffirm bonds. Families often gathered to share dishes prepared with care from preserved foods, dried meats, stored roots, frozen fish, rendered fat, and berries dried under the summer sun. Each ingredient carried memories of warmer months and the labor of those who collected them. Someone hands you a wooden bowl filled with steaming stew. The broth is rich and thick, dotted with chunks of fish, roots, and herbs. You hold the bowl close, letting the heat warm your fingers. When you take your first sip, the flavor spreads through your mouth with a deep, earthy comfort that makes your shoulders relax. Around you, others enjoy similar bowls, sipping slowly, speaking in soft tones that blend seamlessly with the crackling fire. Across the clearing, a group of children gather around a platter of dried berries mixed with fat, forming small round bites of concentrated energy. Their laughter rises in short bursts as they exchange the snacks like small treasures. You smile, realizing how even simple foods become moments of connection in winter's quiet world. A lesser-known detail drifts into your awareness. In some regions, families crafted winter treats by mixing crushed dried berries with warm marrow, forming nutrient-rich bites that could last for weeks. These small morsels were often shared during communal meals or given to children during long journeys. You see that tradition mirrored here as a mother hands one such bite to a toddler sitting in her lap. You stand and walk toward another fire where older members of the group sit with bowls in their hands. Their conversation flows gently, weaving stories from earlier winters with reflections on hunts, travel routes, and the weather's shifting moods. One elder speaks about a river crossing that nearly failed years ago, while another laughs softly, remembering a winter camp where children once built a maze out of snow tunnels. These shared memories warm the space as much as the fire. Conversations in winter create their own kind of heat, a reminder that survival is not only physical endurance, but the maintenance of relationships and shared identity. As you listen, someone sets a flat stone near the fire and begins placing thin slices of frozen fish onto its heated surface. The fish curls lightly as it warms, releasing a delicate aroma that travels through the clearing. You watch the cook flip the slices with a carved wooden tool, turning them into small, savory pieces shared easily from hand to hand. The simple act of cooking together strengthens community even in the harshest cold. A quiet question arises in your mind, one often discussed among researchers. Did winter gatherings center more on necessity or on tradition? The answer appears to lie somewhere between the two. Necessity brought families together for meals, but tradition shaped the rituals of sharing, gratitude, and hospitality. Food created community, but community gave food meaning. You move toward another group, sitting near a low snow wall built to block the wind. Here, several people sort through small baskets filled with herbs. These herbs, preserved carefully during warmer months, are added to stews and teas to enhance their warmth. A woman holds up a bundle of dried mint, explaining to a younger listener how the herb warms the chest and lifts the spirits during long nights. Her voice carries the cadence of knowledge passed down lovingly. Near the far side of the clearing, two men scrape ice from a large frozen slab that was once part of a fish storage cache. They chip away thin flakes that melt instantly on contact with the warm bowls. Such ice was often stored intentionally during deep winter, kept buried under layers of snow to ensure it remained clean. Even ice could be treated as a resource when used thoughtfully. The fires continue to crackle. People shift closer to one another as they finish eating, gathering in small clusters to share more stories. A young person plays a soft rhythm on a drum, tapping with gentle fingers. The beat is steady, not meant for ceremony, but for simple companionship. The sound creates a soothing pulse that settles over the clearing, filling the air with a feeling of safety. A curious detail flickers into memory. In some families, winter meals were accompanied by quiet games or riddles asked around the fire. These were not competitions, but small mental exercises to keep minds sharp during long periods indoors. You watch now as a man poses a riddle to a group of children, who tilt their heads thoughtfully before bursting into giggles when one of them guesses the answer. After some time, the fires begin to settle into glowing embers. People move slowly, stretching, adjusting cloaks, preparing to pack supplies, and continue their journey. The meal has done its work. Bellies are full, spirits lifted, and warmth shared generously. You walk toward the edge of the clearing and look back one last time. The scene glows like a living painting. People stand close together. Children cling to parents' hands. Tools and bowls are gathered neatly. The fires pulse with soft orange light. These shared meals are not merely moments of nourishment, they are moments of renewal. They carry families through the cold with reminders of belonging, gratitude, and shared strength. You turn away from the clearing and face the path ahead. The sky brightens steadily, hinting at a day that will feel just a little warmer than the last. The land stretches before you, waiting to reveal the next lesson of winter. The quiet, flickering moments of hope that help families endure even the harshest freeze. With a steady breath, you step forward into that promise. You leave the circle of fires behind, stepping into a brightness that feels almost unfamiliar after so many nights shaped by starlight and quiet flames. The morning sky spreads in a pale sweep across the horizon, and though the cold still bites at your cheeks, something in the air feels different, gentler, almost tender. Winter is far from over, yet you sense small cracks forming in its once unyielding armor. And with every step you take across the wide, snowy field, you begin to notice the subtle, fleeting moments that once lifted families through the hardest days of the frozen season. You walk slowly, letting the crisp air fill your lungs. The snow beneath your boots sighs with each step, its sound softer now than before. Ahead lies a gentle rise dotted with small drifts that sparkle in the growing light. As you approach, you hear the faint sound of children laughing somewhere in the distance, a bright sound that blends into the landscape like the first hint of birdsong in early spring. Hope often arrived quietly like this, folded into simple moments that warmed cold spirits. A grounded detail from historical experience comes into your mind. Families learn to celebrate even minor changes in winter's mood, knowing these tiny shifts could carry emotional weight. A slightly longer day. A patch of snow that thawed just enough to expose earth. The return of certain birds whose calls hinted at seasonal transition. These moments reminded people that harshness was temporary, and that winter would eventually release its hold. You reach the top of the rise, and pause. Below, the land rolls out in gentle waves, and on one of those waves sits a group of children carving small shapes into the snow with sticks. Their hands move quickly, creating lines and swirls that twist into recognizable figures. A moose, a fish, a family huddled beneath a roof of snow. The drawings melt slightly under their warm touch, leaving dark outlines where the sun kisses the surface. You watch for a moment, recognizing how creativity flourishes even in the coldest places. Small joys are as vital to survival as food or fire. A lesser-known detail drifts into your awareness. Some families used snow drawings as quiet seasonal rituals, offering gratitude or marking milestones. Children especially embraced these moments, not fully understanding the symbolism but appreciating the joy of shaping the world around them. Their play acted as a reminder that life continued even in the deepest freeze. You walk down the rise and pass a young couple tending a set of traps near a cluster of trees. They speak softly to each other, sharing a brief joke that makes them smile. The humor is gentle, but its warmth spreads easily between them. Laughter in winter served as a kind of medicine, easing the weight of long nights. You nod at them as you pass. They return the gesture, their eyes bright with resilience. Nearby, an elder kneels beside a small pot where a mixture of herbs simmers lightly. A young person sits beside them, listening as the elder explains which herbs lift the spirit during difficult months. Their voice carries a calm rhythm, and as they speak, the scent of warming tea drifts upward, filling the air with a sweet earthiness. You know this aroma well by now. It feels like a promise that the cold cannot reach everything. As you continue walking, you notice a cluster of footprints leading toward a frozen pond. Curiosity guides your steps. When you arrive, you find a group of people standing together at the pond's edge, watching the surface shimmer under the rising sunlight. A thin layer of frost has formed in swirling patterns, creating delicate arcs and spirals that glow faintly like etched glass. Someone murmurs that these marks look like the sky reflected on the ground. Another laughs softly, saying winter likes to draw its own stories when no one is watching. You step closer and inspect the frost carefully. Its shapes are intricate, as though the cold itself decided to play for a moment rather than impose its usual severity. These small wonders often went unnoticed during the busiest parts of winter, but when families paused long enough to see them, their hearts lifted. Sometimes, survival was not about grand strategy but about remembering to notice beauty. A thought flickers in your mind, one that researchers sometimes reflect upon. Emotional resilience in winter did not come only from physical endurance or communal structure. It also came from these seemingly insignificant moments of lightness and wonder. The human mind, like the body, requires nourishment. Hope grows from small sparks. You leave the pond and follow the path toward a cluster of low spruce trees. Their branches glitter with beads of ice that catch the sunlight, turning them into natural chandeliers that sway gently in the breeze. One tree holds a bundle of feathers tied carefully to a branch. You pause. This small decoration feels intentional. Families sometimes made simple ornaments from feathers or bark during long stretches of winter, marking days of significance or simply celebrating the chance to feel joy. These decorations did not need vibrant colors or elaborate shapes. Their meaning came from the hands that made them. A child approaches from behind you, carrying a small pine cone painted with red berry juice. They hold it up proudly, explaining that they made it to bring good fortune for their family's migration south. You smile and thank them for sharing. The child beams before running back to join the others. Small traditions like this carried entire communities through the cold, reminding young people that hope was something they could create with their own hands. Further ahead, a pair of elders sit together on a fallen log. One holds a small drum and taps a faint rhythm, while the other hums a tune too soft to be called a song. The melody flows like warm breath, filling the space with a peace that settles into your bones. Winter music did not always require ceremony. Sometimes, a few notes hummed in quiet companionship were enough to brighten the world around them. You stand beside the elders for a moment, listening. The rhythm pulses gently through the clearing. Snow shimmers. The air feels warmer than before. You sense how powerful small comforts can be when the world feels heavy. As you prepare to move on, the drumbeat softens into silence. You look toward the distant hills and feel the next stage of winter pulling you forward. The sun climbs higher, casting new light across the snow. Families are preparing to pass knowledge onward, teaching resilience not only through labor and skill, but through the stories and gentle traditions that echo across generations. You take one last breath of the warm scented air before stepping toward the land where wisdom crosses time, held quietly between generations. You walk toward the rising light, leaving behind the echoes of laughter and the soft hum of winter songs. The air carries a feeling of change, not dramatic or sudden, but subtle and steady, like the slow turning of a great wheel. As you move across the snowy plain, you see a cluster of elders and younger family members gathered near a sheltered grove. The scene draws you in with a quiet pull. Something important is happening here. Something rooted in memory, shaped by time, and meant to outlast the cold. You approach slowly. The group sits in a loose circle on compacted snow, their breaths rising in small white clouds. An elder at the center holds a carved wooden staff, its surface worn smooth from years of use. They tap the end gently against the snow, creating a soft thump that calls the gathering to attention. No one fidgets, no one speaks. Even the smallest children sit calmly, sensing the weight of this moment. A grounded reality from cultural tradition rises into your thoughts. Winter was one of the most important seasons for transferring knowledge across generations. Long nights and slower days provided time for elders to speak, for youth to listen, and for families to strengthen a shared sense of identity. Lessons were woven into stories, tasks, rituals, and simple daily gestures. History became a living thread, passed hand to hand like a precious object. The elder speaks, their voice low and steady. They tell of the first winter their grandparents remembered, when storms piled snow higher than the shelters and hunters had to travel farther than ever before to find food. They explain how unity carried the community through that season, how every member shared what they had, and how no one was left behind. The younger listeners lean forward, absorbing each detail with the quiet hunger of those who understand that this knowledge is not for curiosity alone, it is for survival. Beside the elder, a young woman holds a bundle wrapped in hide. She opens it slowly, revealing a set of old tools, a carved bone scraper, a stone knife, a wooden bowl polished through decades of use. The elder lifts each object carefully and explains its origin. The scraper belonged to a hunter who taught children how to prepare hides before they learned to speak. The knife was once used during a season when food was scarce and every cut mattered. The bowl held countless meals shared between families during cold nights. These objects are not museum pieces, they are memories made tangible. A lesser-known detail flickers into your mind. Some families kept winter bundles containing items of significance that were brought out only during certain gatherings. These bundles held traditions, stories, or knowledge too important to risk losing. To touch an item from such a bundle was to touch history directly, reminding listeners that they inherited more than names. As the elder continues speaking, you notice the younger people occasionally mimic gestures, running fingers over the grains of wood, tracing the curve of a blade with their eyes, repeating small motions that echo the elders. Learning in winter was never only verbal, it was physical, sensory, embodied. To understand a tool, one had to hold it. To understand a story, one had to feel its weight in the air. These teachings stayed rooted because they were experienced, not simply heard. Nearby, another elder teaches two children how to identify the age of a tree by the thickness of its bark and the pattern of its branches. The children listen with wide eyes as the elder explains how older trees hold knowledge of storms past, how their leaning trunks point toward the harshest winds, and how their bark reveals cycles of scarcity and abundance. Nature served as a library, waiting for someone patient enough to read its pages. A thoughtful question surfaces, one researchers still discuss. Were winter teachings tied to specific individuals, or did every family member contribute to the collective memory? Evidence suggests that both occurred. Some elders were renowned for their wisdom, trusted to lead rituals and recite histories. Others shared practical knowledge, demonstrating techniques through daily tasks. Together, the community wove a tapestry of learning, ensuring that no single perspective held all the truth. Knowledge was communal, balanced, and enduring. You sit beside the group as the lessons shift from stories of the past to preparations for the future. The elders explain how to identify safe spring camps, how to read the first meltwater, how to listen for the subtle gurgle of rivers waking from winter sleep. These teachings pair memory with anticipation, showing that survival depends not only on remembering the past, but on preparing for what is yet to come. A young boy speaks up shyly, asking how families survived a season when games seemed to vanish for weeks. An elder answers with calm patience, describing a winter when traps yielded little and fish avoided the ice holes. During that time, families pooled resources, relying on stored fat, dried berries, and food caches hidden under marked drifts. They remembered that scarcity was temporary, and that resilience came through cooperation, not fear. The boy nods slowly, absorbing the lesson. In another corner of the grove, a group of teens practices tying knots with sinew under the guidance of an older hunter. They fumble at first, but the elder corrects them gently, showing how to tighten each loop with controlled tension. Knot making may seem simple, but in winter it holds shelters together, secures loads on sleds, and binds tools that might otherwise fall apart. Precision matters. The teens practice again and again until their knots hold firm. You watch as one elder lifts a small carved figure from the snow. It represents an ancestor who traveled these lands long before memory. The elder passes the figure around the circle, encouraging each person to hold it for a moment. The gesture carries quiet, meaning the past is not distant. It is carried by every hand in the present. You hold the figure when it comes to you, feeling the smoothness of its surface, shaped by countless fingers across countless winters. As the gathering continues, the sun rises higher, casting long beams of light that streak across the snow. The elders conclude the lesson with a brief moment of silence. Everyone closes their eyes, breathing in the cold air, honoring the memories shared. Then they rise, stretch their arms, and begin preparing for the next phase of their journey. You stand as well, warmed by something deeper than fire. The air feels full, as though the teachings hang around you like a soft cloak. This knowledge, passed carefully across generations, is the thread that weaves families through winter. It binds past, present, and future in a steady line. As the group disperses, you follow a path leading beyond the grove. Ahead, the snow brightens and the sky widens. Winter is not ending yet, but its grip is loosening. Something new awaits on the other side of these teachings. A moment of release, a shift toward light. You take your first step toward the promise of thaw. You walk away from the grove where elders shared their winter wisdom, and the air ahead feels lighter, as if the land itself has exhaled. The sky stretches open in pale gold, and the snow beneath your feet softens into a surface that catches sunlight rather than swallowing it. Every breath you take tastes slightly warmer, carrying hints of change so gentle you might miss them if you were not listening closely. Even the wind feels different. It brushes your cheek with a touch that no longer stings. Instead, it whispers of something on the horizon, something long awaited. You continue across a broad slope that curves toward a shallow valley. The snow there glows faintly pink under the early sun. As you descend, a quiet sound reaches your ears. A drip, another drip. Then a soft, steady tapping like fingers on a hollow drum. Meltwater, tiny droplets falling from the tips of pine needles. You pause, listening. The sound is small, almost fragile, but it carries the weight of a season shifting. Winter is beginning to release its hold. A grounded understanding from traditional knowledge enters your thoughts. Families recognize the earliest signs of spring not by temperature alone, but by the behavior of snow. When the surface began to crust slightly during the day and soften into a faint slush at dusk, they knew the thaw was near. When shadows brightened instead of deepened, they knew the season was turning. And when meltwater whispered through still frozen streams, they prepared for the slow unwinding of winter's long grip. You step forward again and notice fresh tracks crossing your path. Small ones, delicate prints left by a bird that has just returned. You bend closer. The shape is familiar. A species that usually appears only at the edge of spring. You smile softly. Even the animals are beginning to sense the shift. Lessons from the land continue, written in tiny footprints. At the base of the valley, a cluster of families has begun to gather their belongings. Sleds rest on patches of hardened snow. Bundles are tied with careful knots. Children carry small baskets filled with leftover winter supplies. Dogs lie curled in shallow hollows, their ears twitching at the slightest sound. You approach and see that people are speaking quietly, their faces calm yet expectant. They are preparing for the next move. Soon, they will travel toward areas where the snow thins faster, where water begins to flow, where the land offers new opportunities after months of stillness. A young hunter tests the edge of a blade he crafted during the colder weeks. He nods approvingly as the metal gleams in the morning light. A mother adjusts the hood of her child's winter robe, making sure the wind cannot sneak inside. An elder stands with eyes half closed, smelling the air as though reading the future in its subtle warmth. These small preparations ripple through the camp like a quiet wave of readiness. A lesser-known detail rises gently in your mind. Some winter camps held a simple ritual when the first trustworthy signs of thaw appeared. Families would place a small piece of ice in a shallow bowl, set it near the fire, and watch it melt together. The melting symbolized release, renewal, and the return of lighter days. You imagine such a bowl somewhere nearby, its ice slowly surrendering to the soft heat. You wander through the camp, feeling the low hum of activity. No one rushes. Winter has taught patience. Every movement unfolds with calm purpose. Someone smooths the runners of a sled with a final layer of animal fat. Someone else checks the bindings of snowshoes that will soon see less use as the ground changes. Two children chase each other between snowdrifts, their laughter echoing in the thinning air. Hope moves among them like a quiet animal, padding gently from person to person. You step toward a narrow rise beyond the camp. From its top, you can see the land stretching outward in ripples of white, the edges already touched with hints of new color. Patches of pale brown earth peek through the melting snow. Clusters of trees shine with droplets. A bird takes flight, its wings slicing the cold with easy grace. You stand still, letting the view settle into your memory. This is the moment winter loosens, the moment families welcome the first breath of transition. A thought touches your mind, one that researchers often consider. The end of winter was not a single moment, but a gradual shift experienced differently each year. Some winters melted reluctantly, holding on even as the sun rose higher. Others softened quickly, releasing snow in wide sheets of glittering slush. And some seasons hovered in between, testing the patience and adaptability of all who relied on the land. The truth of winter's end was always written slowly, never rushed. You look back toward the camp and see the final preparations taking shape. People are lining up their sleds, adjusting packs, gathering children, and offering short final blessings for safety. A soft murmur of anticipation fills the air. Not excitement exactly, something steadier, something rooted in gratitude. Winter has been endured, lessons have been learned, stories have been shared, tools have been shaped, and now the path opens toward warmth. You walk back into the circle of families. An elder steps forward and lifts their hand gently toward the sky. They speak a few quiet words, thanking the season for its teachings and asking for safe passage into the next one. Their voice carries the steady tone of someone who has done this many times before, someone who understands the cycles of the land as intimately as breath. Everyone stands in respectful silence. Then slowly, the elder lowers their hand. The moment lingers like a suspended snowflake, delicate and full of meaning. After a soft beat of silence, the movement begins. Sleds shift, dogs bark lightly, boots press into fresh tracks. The camp starts to flow forward with a smooth, unified motion. You join them, walking alongside the procession as it heads toward a trail brightened by the rising sun. Around you, the land glimmers with melting frost. The air carries the faint scent of waking earth. The soft crunch of snow underfoot feels gentler now, less brittle, as though even the ground is ready to breathe again. As you move with the group, you sense something deeper unfolding. Winter has not defeated these families. It has shaped them, strengthened them, held them in its frozen embrace until they emerged wiser and more connected. Survival was never simply about enduring the cold. It was about leaning into community, memory, adaptation, and the quiet sparks of hope that flicker even in the darkest nights. You take a slow breath as the snow brightens around you. The thaw approaches, the land softens, and the families step confidently toward the warming horizon. Now the trail grows quieter, and your steps feel softer, as though the snow beneath you has loosened its hold on the long season. The air slows its movement around you, turning gentle, patient, unhurried. You breathe in, feeling that faint shift of warmth that signals the world is easing itself toward gentler days. You walk through this easing with a relaxed rhythm, letting each moment stretch just a little longer, just enough to calm the thoughts that still flutter at the edges of your mind. You feel the families moving slowly around you, their voices now hushed, softened by the settling light. Their silhouettes blend with the pale horizon as they walk toward places where the snow thins and the first threads of new life wait beneath the surface. They no longer rush. They no longer brace themselves. Instead, they glide forward with quiet confidence, their bodies remembering the lessons winter has offered them. You let your own body fall into that same slow, steady pace. The light fades in gentle strokes, brushing the hills with muted gold. You breathe in again, deeper this time, letting your shoulders soften and your jaw loosen. The world feels calm here, wrapped in a soft blanket of stillness. Every sound grows rounder, quieter, as though cushioned by the snow that remains. A distant crack of melting ice, the faint sigh of wind weaving between trees, the deepening hush of families settling into a rhythm shaped by peace rather than urgency. You keep walking, slower now, each step lighter than the last, and as the sky grows dim and the land folds itself into rest, you feel yourself drifting, gently, into that same quiet place.